the land, the water, the sky, and all that live on, in, and above it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this land and continue to care for it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. And you know, this morning, I don't know about you, but when I woke up and sat down at my desk to do a little bit of work in preparation for this, I had a big bright moon shining directly through the window and a little bit of mist on the water. It was just beautiful. And I sometimes think when I look at the moon, it's a little bit like looking at a lot of the rock that we have along the coast here that's, I'm told by the geologists, is some of the oldest exposed rock on the planet. I have no idea, but we know it's old. And it puts a certain perspective on things and the timelines and that. And what we think are really important on a day-to-day basis sometimes can be overshadowed by things that have much longer-term significance. Deep thoughts of the morning. You have to be careful of those sometimes. Anyway, Meg Witch, with that, we're now back to our agenda. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest? All right, heads are shaking. You haven't told me about any open forum items or anything like that. And I'm going to propose, Council, before we get into our waste management discussion, to first actually handle the bylaws and the motion to reconsider and the rock crushing of Oak Bay and all that. And I'm going to start that by going to our CEO, Greg Mariotti, for an update on the file, because I like to get that out of our way and then start talking trash. CEO Mariotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Coetzee, and good morning, Council. So while we were sitting in Council last week, the Township did receive an updated letter from the OLT. And so basically, the letter is in response to Oak Bay, asking the OLT to compel Council to issue the bylaw. And so, well, actually, the OLT has taken over from Council to basically enforce and implement the bylaw. So there's a section 1.7 in the Tribunal's Rules of Practice and Procedure that relates to failure to comply with the rules of the Tribunal. And basically, the Tribunal has a discretion to determine the consequences of non-compliance and may grant necessary relief or exercise any of its powers authorized by legislation or regulation. And so what that means is that there's a certain section in the Planning Act that states what the powers of the Tribunal may be. And essentially, the Tribunal can amend the bylaw in such a manner as the Tribunal may determine or direct the Council of the municipality to amend the bylaw in accordance with the Tribunal's order. So the Tribunal is ordering Council to amend the bylaw. So really, having to discuss this or maybe revisit it or vote on it again is a moot point at this time.
In other words, we don't need a motion or resolution of Council to pass the bylaw because the OLT has done that on our behalf.
That's correct, yes.
And with, I will inform Council with, how should I put this? Reluctance. I did sign that bylaw last night when it was prepared by staff for me, given this information. That was just a formality, not one that I enjoyed doing, but one that I knew I had to do, because it's basically an OLT instruction, whether or not Council agrees or disagrees, whether or not I agree or disagree. It's just, and that is my understanding. The status of actually most OLT conclusions. We don't have a motion coming in front of us when the OLT rules on something, because they've given the direction. The province has said this is what you shall do. So anyway, with that, we don't need a motion to reconsider, nor do we need a vote on the bylaw. So that section of this, or Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. I understand this is being rammed down our throat, but I think what's important for us to do is to push back. And we had general consensus that under the complaint resolution section, there was basically no teeth in it. There's no clarification on who's going to be doing the inspections and things like that. And I think that it behooves us in our responsibility to communicate back to the OLT and say that there is deficiency in the resolution, sorry, in the the complaint resolution section that needs clarification and definitions of skills required to do the inspections and what the enforcement path is going to be. So I think that we need, if we are having this rammed down our throat, I think we as a council need to pass a resolution requesting that the OLT expand on their definition of this bylaw and cover the points that are not covered so that we as a township and our communities are more effectively protected, because right now the way it reads, it's nice verbiage, but there's no action and there's no consequences. And I would like to recommend that we pass a resolution, craft and pass a resolution today requesting that the OLT flush out the details on the various, the levels 1, 2, and 3 requiring the definitions of certification and expertise to do the inspections, definitions of who is going to be responsible for doing the inspections, and what the enforcement and consequences will be for failures.
Oops, CO Mariotta, please.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. I totally understand where Councillor Hazelton is coming from. There is a certain amount of grayness in the bylaw in terms of monitoring and enforcement. If I may ask Council to let staff really digest this and give staff some time to review what other tools we may have at our disposal, whether it be tools related to, say, a site alteration bylaw, a noise bylaw. Is there anything else that we can implement to make sure that our residents are looked after in a fair manner? And also, we know that the bylaw department is working very closely with the Ministry of the Environment, and any adverse effect will be looked at very closely by the ministry. So at this point, if I can ask council to let staff come up with a plan for what's going to happen in Oak Bay.
If I could, I'm okay with that strategy for now, but I think it needs to come back onto our agenda so that we can understand a month, 2 months, 3 months from today what the progress has been to reinforce this and provide better protection for our residents. I don't know what the date for that would be, but I think we need to get it back on our agenda so that we can understand and be comfortable that we're doing the right things for our community.
Councillor Graziano, please.
I thought Councillor Jarvis was before me.
I took my hand down because of Councillor Hazelton reflected my thoughts, so no need for me to duplicate that.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I apologize for the raspiness of my voice. Clearly, you can hear that I'm a little bit under the weather. I think that per Councillor Hazelton's comments, this would be a good opportunity to put this on the councillor tracker as a gentle reminder to council, we passed a resolution that allowed council to meet once every other month to address outstanding council matters. That was supposed to kick off in September. I have yet to see anything from staff, and I'm hoping that perhaps they'll proceed to coordinate our first inaugural meeting soon. But with that said, this would be a great opportunity to put one of or this particular item on the agenda for future council meetings as we start to have those meetings consistently applied every other month. So just a general suggestion that we not lose sight. I echo Councillor Hazelton's comments. We should not lose sight of this. This should not be delayed. We should be addressing this as promptly, as expeditiously as possible. Yes, let's give staff the opportunity to come back with a game plan, but council shouldn't be losing sight of this, nor should we be delaying this conversation. So if we can, let's perhaps we can instruct staff to put this onto the tracker that they have created for council, and to add this to the agenda item for our next council, outstanding council matter meeting. Thank you.
Clerk Way.
Just as a follow-up to that, the meeting that was directed by council for staff to organize these bi-monthly meetings, I have asked members for specific information and details on how I can move forward, because the original resolution was not clear in the direction of what was being asked to be organized. I have not received sufficient information back from members and how that was to proceed. And so that's why it hasn't proceeded at this point in time, as well as there has been further direction about other training opportunities that have kind of taken over in that regard. So that's why that meeting hasn't taken place yet.
Thank you. Councillor Bochek.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I think a fair amount of people know that after the resolution was presented to council, I did some independent work on this, and one of the things I found out through speaking with aldermen and council members from different townships and cities that have grinding in them is that if we did not sign this resolution at the last council meeting, that the MOE would have complete control over the inspection and making sure that things are being complied to. But by signing this and complying to the OLT agreement, I believe I'm under the understanding that then we can move forward with a plan of how council would like to deal with the mitigation after you sign the OLT agreement. So I think there's room. I agree with Councillor Hazelton. I think there's room here. Now that this is signed and it's gone through, I believe we have the ability to engage in the mitigation process. But if we didn't do that, we would not have that ability. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think I don't want us to I think it's important, and I'd like CEO Mariotti to confirm that the comments made by Councillor Hazelton will be part of the review that you'll be doing the next couple of weeks. In that, I think it's very important that we understand as council and obviously for our residents as to what we can and cannot do. And I agree 100% with Councillor Hazelton is that the resolution that OLT has given to us, and which we are not allowed to modify, is not 100% clear. And it's difficult to interpret, and whether or not our lawyers or even the MECP can give us advice as to how we best get clarification on some of those issues. I hope that is part of the work that you do. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to follow up on our clerk's comments with respect to seeking additional information, and not to stray down a different path here, but I think it is important.
Sprained, so please be as brief as possible.
Absolutely. Going back to as I was saying, my understanding was that this was going to happen relatively quickly. I think our instructions were for it to commence in September. I did receive an email from the clerk asking for clarity, and a response was sent to her on 8/1/2024, providing the clarity. I'm not sure whether or not she went to council seeking further clarity from other council members. But perhaps given the fact that she's identified this as a hindrance from that meeting occurring, perhaps we can clarify that as quickly as possible so we can progress with the meeting as instructed by council and as passed by council. Again, this is a great format for us to be able to address situations such as these. And I'd hate to have it kind of sitting there in a kind of a pause state if other council members have received emails that perhaps weren't responded to. So, but from my perspective, I did receive it and I did respond to her on 8/1, and I'd like to be able to see perhaps this be put on the agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I think that takes care of that section 7 of our current agenda. So now we'll go to the new business item, the waste management discussion. CO Mariotti, would you like to lead this off, or would you like me to lead it off? I can lead it off. All right. I call this this special council meeting discuss waste for a couple of reasons. One is to update you and the general public on the fact that CO Mariotti and myself did meet with the MECP, is it a week ago now? And we met with Chris Hyde, who is the director of in this area, and we also met with, and I got my wrong notes in front of me. Basically, Chris Hyde's boss is the regional director, and I've forgotten her name, and I thought I had that on a note, and I apologize to all of you, I don't. Yes. Rachel, got the wrong note in front of me. Anyway, we'll get that name confirmed for you, but we met with them, and they basically told us, and this was a follow-up to a meeting we had with some senior staff at MECP a few weeks prior, that their interpretation of the EPA regulations is that regulation, excuse me, 351 that obliges marinas to collect waste from pleasure boaters is actually not applicable to boaters whose boats originate from cottages. It's not applicable, if you will, to municipal residents. It's only applicable to the people at those cottages. And frankly, I don't read, when I read Regulation 351, where a pleasure boat is only for non-resident boaters. Because their definition of pleasure boat means a boat used primarily for the carriage of a person or a person for pleasure, whether charter or not, whether for competition or not, and includes a boat used on water for living purposes. It didn't say and must be. So to me, anyway, I just wanted you all to understand that the idea of having marinas privately collect waste from cottagers or water access only residents, MECP doesn't see that as legit. We strongly disagree. I know that CO Mariotti is seeking a legal opinion as to if this interpretation makes sense given Regulation 351 and Regulation 347, and Regulation 347, which covers basically waste management, as under 8.1, the following waste systems are exempt from Part 5 and the Act and this regulation, and includes marine craft waste disposal systems. And Regulation 355 refers to marine craft waste disposal systems. And of course, none of the words are quite perfectly consistent because these regulations weren't written as carefully as you might hope. But So that's part of our discussion, and what I would like council to confirm or deny, but I think what we should be doing is continuing our pursuit of convincing the MECP through one means or another that Regulation 351 around marinas does include providing waste services to all pleasure boats, including those owned by residents in our municipality. So that's one element that's behind this meeting. And the second element behind this meeting is the fact that we know that district has prepared a budget for the next couple of years, and they're looking at basically their budget at this moment is what I would call status quo. And status quo includes their, by the end of 2025, getting rid of all the marina bins and generally replacing that with lakeside collection, I believe they call it, which is basically where they park what you and I might call a garbage truck, a waste collection truck, a vehicle at marinas or lakeside locations for a certain number of hours each week as a replacement of that service. It was interesting to note that during our conversation with the MECP, both Chris Hyde and his boss, Rachel, last name I can't remember, have cottages. And in both cases, they have to drive their waste to a common waste collection site. And so, but they don't have to boat from their cottage to the land to then get into a car and then drive. And I think that's a significant difference. And they considered their regulations, which require us to boat into our marinas, take the garbage, transfer it to a vehicle, a car, and then drive it some distance to wherever a common collection as a minor inconvenience. And I don't think they appreciate the distances, especially on Georgian Bay or some of our larger lakes. So that's where we're at, and the district with their budget, their status quo. And if we fail to give any direction, that's how things are going to unfold. So I want us to now try to discuss how we best believe we should go forward, and whether or not we can narrow down and ideally land on how we would like to see waste collection evolve, because the sooner we can give those instructions to district as to what they will be or not be doing for us, the better we are in moving this whole file forward. So that's my brief overview, and we'll get the discussion going. And Councillor Cooper, I see your hand is up.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And yes, my hand popped up. Funny thing. Just wanted to ask a couple of questions about some of the things that you said that I think might be important. I don't know, but one of the terminologies you used was pleasure craft, I think. The vessels on
the pleasure boat is the term they use in Regulation 351.
Right. So, but what I want to clarify is that there's a pleasure craft, and then there are vessels for transportation. And I think there's a huge distinction there. A ski boat sitting at a dock in a drive-in cottage is a big difference between that and somebody that has a vessel they use for traveling anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes to get to a marina. That's for transportation. And I think there's a strong distinction there. So I just wanted to say that maybe when we're getting legal opinions, we could explore that definition, because I don't think we fall under pleasure craft when we're considering water access only residences. That's the first thing. If you don't mind looking into that, that would be helpful. Secondly, basically two things. One is that there's a huge amount of non-compliance. We've raised this many times before, but there's a huge amount of non-compliance around Ontario. And why should we consider being any different than Parry Sound, Midland, Penetang, Gananoque? I could go on ad nauseum. Why should we be treated differently? We shouldn't. And we should consider ourselves being in the same position. And if we are in the same position, then our marinas can operate and should operate exactly the same way as marinas do in those other communities I just mentioned. So there's no logic to that. And precedent says it's already being done in a lot of places. So I think that should be our position. I did, just as a question, Mr. Mayor, was that explored? Did they have any response to that?
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, their response, the response of, can you please find Rachel's last name for me, because I'm frustrated calling her by her first name. I don't want to be disrespectful. Her response was, well, then the rest of the province is breaking the rules and should be their regulation. Their regulation should be enforced. And I asked her, and to me this is crucial in my opinion, is are you considering telling all the yachters, to just the non-resident boaters, if you will, that are using their, are you considering asking them to transport their garbage to a licensed waste collection site? And she was not. And so my basic argument is, you show up with a weekend's worth of garbage. Does it matter whether it was produced at a cottage, on a boat, or on a yacht? And does it matter whether it was produced by a resident or a non-resident of your municipality? And she started talking about construction waste. And I said, well, we're not collecting construction waste at marinas. We're collecting residential household waste. So they are insistent that a resident should not be able to use marina bins. Well, a yachter, a renter, whatever you want to call them, should. And I think that is an inconsistency and inequity. Nor do I understand any sort of logic as to why waste from a resident is different than waste from a yachter.
Could I finish off with that then, just to say that on that particular point, those marinas that we're referring to, I've referred to in Parry Sound, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have two types of vessels there.
Mm-hmm.
Cottage or resident vessels go in and out of those marinas. I've done it. I did it for years out of Midland and Penetang. So that was just, so we need to establish with MOECP, if we need their approval, and I'm not convinced that we do. I think we need to establish with them that there are people using those marinas. I think in Gananoque, where they're servicing the Thousand Islands, is probably mostly vessels that provide transportation, and they're not necessarily live aboard. So I just wanted to establish that they need to understand that. I think the other thing I wanted to sort of point out is, do we, since all those communities are not complying supposedly with MOECP, why should we care if they can do it? Why shouldn't we do the same thing they do? That's something that we have to consider. So I throw that out as a sort of, that's an option that we may not get their approval, but if they're not enforcing anywhere else, why should we care? The final thing I'll say is that based on the distances and the travel patterns of our water access community, 1 3 or 4 hour period on a Sunday afternoon ain't going to work. It just will not work. And I think anybody that's in the water access world will tell you that, because people are traveling. We have a huge number of people that are retired or semi-retired, or have can handle their own schedule. And you got to be nuts to go down on Sunday night, because you're going to run into a ton of traffic. So there we go. I think that's I think we need to sort of keep that in mind, that it isn't really a viable option. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure that we're approaching this in the right way, at least from my point of view, because there's more options available to us than just using the district to collect our garbage from our residents on the water. I'll give you an example. I used to own a marina and a resort, and we would have islanders come in from Tay Township to our marina, and we would collect their garbage and we would charge them a fee per month. And it would go into a truck and we'd take it up to the Baxter ward and divide it up and put it into all the different bins. It became a profit center for our business. I don't know the situation at South Bay Cove, but South Bay Cove has private bins, which they recycle and get paid for some of the recycling and everything. So I think there's an avenue here to look at this as a business model, maybe exclude the district in some fashion from this. But I believe there's an answer here other than what the district and the MOE is suggesting. I think there's an avenue here. We have to also look that in this township, we have over, I think it's over 40 marinas, if I'm not mistaken, inland and on the coast. That is a lot of people, a lot of business owners that I believe we should have sitting in a room with council or as a committee to discuss their feelings on the solid waste issue that they are dealing with and get their input. So I think if we were to put a calling out to all the marina owners to sit in a room and discuss the issues, inform them, which I'm sure they're not right now, inform them on what is going to be happening in the future, and if that they have any ideas to move forward in a different direction. These are smart, independent businessmen that some of them already are taking care of their solid waste problem themselves. So I think it's upon us to reach out to them, bring them in, and discuss it with them and get their feelings on it. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of clarifications on that, if I may. One, these days, if a marina were to collect, sort, and just take garbage to a transfer station, they would require a license to do so. Secondly, marinas that are serving, if you will allow me, I'm just going to use the word yachters to distinguish from cottage boats and things like that. Marinas that serve yachters are legally allowed to have, I'm going to call them private bins, placed by a licensed carrier, private bins in their backyard to collect garbage and recycling. However, per Chris Hyde and Rachel Fletcher, I got the last name now, I apologize to Ms. Fletcher for calling her by her first name all the time. Mr. Hyde and Ms. Fletcher, per them, those marinas are not allowed to collect garbage from any of their customers who happen to be residents, only from their customers who happen to be yachters. So that, you know, and so you used the example of South Bay Cove. Best of my knowledge, the bins that are there are placed by a private, like a licensed private carrier, but they're a handful or fewer. I think they have 2 or 3 cottage customers. Legally, are not allowed to use those bins.
So,
Mike,
if I may, the term yachters, I think, is a good term. But there's yachters that own multiple properties within the township, such as myself. I have a big boat at a marina, a yachting, whatever they call it. But I own 2 properties in the township and I pay taxes on those properties. I also pay part of the marina's taxes through my slip fees. So I think there's a lot of conversation to be had in the future about yachters. One of the things that came across my table from a resident is why do we not have stickers for the windows of boats for people that are residents of the township, that when they come in, that's their proof that they're a resident and they're allowed to bring their solid waste to a particular bin. They are residents of the township, so they should have garbage collection. And the way to identify them is to have either a piece of ID with them that says they're a resident or a sticker on the window of their boat, especially if they're going to bring these garbage cans and park them or garbage trucks and park them at a launch ramp, we need some sort of identification that's saying this guy wasn't up for the day fishing from Scarborough and he's dumping all his garbage off.
Well, that'll become part of the collection challenge, that like if district were to operate lakeside collection, how they're going to distinguish between residents versus non-residents. And the prior remark you made about whether a resident yacht owner could take their garbage to a marina, I don't know how MECP is going to interpret these regulations on that regard. So that we haven't looked into that. There was one other thing you said that I wanted to follow up on, and now I've forgotten what it was.
You did mention about the licensing, and I didn't know that was an issue.
Yeah, no, definitely. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to, like a contractor here can offer, for instance, to go and collect garbage from a bunch of residents and take it to the transfer station on their behalf without having a license to carry waste. That's the way the current regulations are. Yeah. Well, in theory, any contractor who is collecting waste is supposed to have and I'm sure there was another point, but it'll come back to me later perhaps. But in the meantime, I'm going to go to Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's my opinion that this yachter allowance legislation is simply just a red herring that's confusing the matter and making it more complex than it otherwise should be. Regardless of whether or not the province were to address the gap in legislation, the district would still not provide us the service that we need them to provide us. And we've seen this through our requests for costs that have been ignored, the ambulance station situation. We see that the district, when they are focused on something and they are determined that that's how it's going to be, that's how it's going to be. And so with that said, we decide, and one of the things that I think our working group has learned is that we decide who our service providers are going to be. We have a choice. That choice is we either A, work with the District of Muskoka and let them determine what services they're going to offer us, and we choose within the services that they've identified, or B, we go to another vendor who provides us a service that is more better tailored, betterly is not a word, my grammar, but better tailored to our needs. So with that, one thing that I think we have lost time on is capturing information on parallel options. We don't have instructions. We have yet to give instructions to staff requesting that perhaps they go to market with an RFP for companies like GFL or similar to see what it's going to cost for them to do what we need them to do and whether or not they even offer those services or could offer those services. We should also look at subsidizing the marinas that do want to become ECA compliant and do want to offer this type of bin on their properties. And if we look at it from our at a macro level, our entire municipality, pretty much almost every ward has a marina that uses bins. We've got Cog, Honey Harbor, all being supplied or all being supported by their respective marinas. We got Go Home Lake, we have 6 Mile Lake, and we also have Gloucester or the Pool that all have bins and all benefit from bins. And so if we were to offer a subsidy program whereby we subsidize the costs associated with becoming compliant and erecting a cage or a facility, then it would be applied township wide. It wouldn't just be benefiting a select few. So my thought here is, why not go to RFP, find out in parallel as we're working with the district and the province on what can be done and what it's going to cost us to do it on our own. At the same time, look at a subsidy program. Lastly, MPP Smith had suggested that he would be very inclined to help us with this matter and would work on getting a meeting with the minister directly rather than their team, their lower level team members. And I strongly recommend we consider going to MPP Smith and asking that he support us and assist us in this matter and facilitate that meeting with the minister to ensure that that conversation happens. And lastly, perhaps staff can also send a letter to the Ontario Liberal leader requesting their position on this and where they stand with respect to this issue, because I'm sure our constituents will want to know what both sides are and how either side perceives this issue and how either side can help. So that's my summary in a whole. I think that we need to start understanding what it's going to look like if we do this ourselves, and we can do this ourselves, and that's what we've learned. So my comments, thank you.
Thank you very much. One thing you did do, even though I know it wasn't part of your program, is you reminded me the other remark I wanted to make to Councillor Bocek. So I'm going to do that because I'm going to lead into one of the things you said is, and that is that I know a number of us have reached out to numerous marina operators and done that and get their take. And what I have heard from a number of marina operators is they would love to be able to manage it privately. They would rather manage it privately than manage it through their bins, because then they can directly control with the license carrier, the GFL or the Mid-Ontario or whoever they get, the placement and the management of their bins. As far as Councillor Graziano's comment about marinas getting their ECAs, what a number of marina operators have said to me is that they don't want ECAs. Because if they get an ECA, their insurance rates will skyrocket. Their lawyers will tell them that their increased exposure to liability suits and things like that, because they will then be responsible for managing a waste collection site. And that, whereas if they're allowed to place bins in cooperation with a licensed carrier, then the licensed carrier has the ECA, not the marina. And that makes a significant difference to the marina as far as their costs are concerned. And so, but yes, can the township be responsible for a portion of solid waste? I think that's part of what part of our today's discussion as to what degree we want to pursue some of those options. Councillor Predko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So my add on this is, of course, Go Home Lake is a district animal. Then what we've talked about with the marinas on the base side, the two bin sites that are on the lake are on district or township property, and they are not associated directly with the marinas. And in conversations with the owners, there's no interest in assuming any responsibility on that. And I think, to go to your point with the ECA, the risk and the insurance and the management and supervision are responsibilities that they are not interested in taking on at this time, especially in this. I think the risk is one of the main factors. And I think to Councillor Cooper's opinion about lakeside pickup, we've kind of gone through on our lake what it would be like to have an afternoon pickup with hundreds of cottagers coming and going from the same location, not just for garbage pickup, but for regular transportation. And it would be very similar to our large item pickup day, but it would be every weekend. And it does not seem like a feasible option at this time. And that kind of leaves us in that area with a depot similar to what we have had established in the Honey Harbor and South Gibson Lake Road area. But unfortunately, right now in the proposals that we have from the district on our waste management in the future, that is not included, and we don't have cost for that. So
you know, that's a concern for me that we don't currently have an option on the table that I think is viable for the Go Home Lake area. And as we're going forward, we need to make sure that we have addressed that. And my recommendation to our council and to district is that we need to have established a depot location and solution. And hopefully, if that were to be established, given the reasonable proximity to South Gibson Depot, in the wintertime, there could be a complementary set of hours so that it's not, these two things are operating at the same time and the same days, but it gives some people choice if they need something that's on a different day and a different time. And I believe that's all I had on my list of things to mention right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. So I've done a lot of work on trying to come up with ideas that would work for marinas, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But I think one of the things that has been going through my mind the most is that we need to find some solution for our township, for our communities, that is fair. And one of the challenges that we have is if we, for example, went with the district's option 1, where we have 2 transfer stations, that could be considered a reasonable base level service where everybody in the township potentially has access to take their garbage someplace and it's not devastatingly far away. It would also then change the billing dynamic where we use rough numbers. Immediately, everybody would have a 50% reduction in their garbage assessment, mill rate assessment tax. And that would then open the door for everyone in the township to decide what kind of higher level service they might want. And so if we think about it that way, and if we think about ways in which we can accomplish that, in the marina world, it's a fairly simple thing because everything would have to be private. In the roadside world, certainly in order for 55% of our township to get services through a private service through their marina, we would have to select option 1 so that we get a 50% reduction on the mill rate taxes, which would then allow each cottage owner an opportunity to pay for a private service. Now, that each cottage owner on a marina environment paying the marina for a private service, to Councillor Bocek's comment, there's a profit opportunity. I'll get back to that in a second. If anybody on a roadside wanted roadside, then as long as we could implement per property billing, that would make sense as well. So that everyone who is on roadside, if the community generally and with all the possible roadside properties wanted to go that path, then fine, they could go that path and get billed directly on a per property basis. So it's not going to impact the rest of the township. I still haven't sorted out in my mind how to solve the Go Home Lake problem, and Councillor Predko has certainly indicated it is a unique problem. And one of the things that I would offer is we've heard from others that private services are probably more effective than public services. And so solving the problem at Go Home Lake, solving the problem at Muskoka Road 33, these may be solutions that could be accomplished more effectively on a private basis. But let me come back to the marina thing. So I mentioned that I've done a fair amount of work. I've worked with waste disposal companies. I've been able to get quotes from them on what the costs for lifts would be. I've modeled this out on large marinas, mid-sized marinas and small marinas. And of course, as you would expect, small marinas don't have an opportunity to make a whole lot of money. But a large marina, with 250 customers could quite likely see somewhere between a $25,000 and $30,000 net profit to their bottom line. somebody with 150 customers could see in the neighborhood of about 15, maybe $16,000 net profit to the bottom line. And what's important here is a marina isn't going to service necessarily just slip customers, but they would potentially also service roadside customers. So we'll pick the mayor's environment where he has to go through Woods Landing or Woods Bay, no, Woods, what's the name of it? Woods Marina? Yeah. You'd have to go through Woods Marina, but presumably all the properties on Couture Lane would be interested in using that marina as a waste disposal site as well. So it would be a lot more than just the slips that would be there. So in doing all of that research and coming up with these numbers, and I'm not going to bore you with my numbers in detail here, but I'll tell you that I've set up an initial expectation that every one of these marinas would have to invest somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 to set up a site that would be reasonable, forgetting about the ECA thing for a second. And then I bundled in and kind of plugged in numbers for maintenance costs, for training costs, for staffing costs. And even with all of those extra costs, we still come up with $25,000 to $30,000 for a large marina. So we have a significant revenue opportunity for these marinas when they go private. Now, if I had to throw in an ECA, and we've already heard that one of the other marinas in Bracebridge, I think it was, had a cost, and I've already talked to the consulting company that did the ECA, so that was about a $10,000 investment. And if you think about that, initially it sounds like a big number, but pick a larger marina, even if it was 20,000, and they amortize that over 5 years, that's only 4,000 a year. So instead of having a $30,000 a year net profit, they would come up with a 26,000 net profit. That's still not a bad number, and all of the marinas are looking for new ways of generating funds. So the analysis that I've done in conjunction with both talking to MECP, with the consulting company that did the ECA definition, and with the lift companies, the private service for a marina is definitely a viable business strategy, as Councillor Bocek already suggested. But it won't work if we as a township bundle in all of the other services that might be delivered to the community. We have to go to the base level of the 2 transfer stations and then let everybody in the township choose to opt up to whatever additional services they might want. And we've heard from the district that they have a pretty cheap curbside pickup. That's interesting. What we also have to be recognizing in all of this is we're talking mostly about waste here, but as we discussed at a previous council meeting, all of the recycling is going to a different company. And so those people on curbside, you get a pass because that's going to be handled for you all automatically. But all of the marinas and all the private services are going to have their lift companies pick up the recycling and then deliver it to this continuous whatever company, Circular Materials down in Barrie. And again, I've already got the quotes from the company, the lift companies, so I know what the costs would be to do all the lifts based on the volumes and weights that we're achieving today. And as I say, the model works and delivers a profit situation for these marinas. So I think we've got part of the solution. I think that we need to, as a council, direct district or tell district that our preferences are, we want to go with a base model, and we want to find out if the district is willing to offer other services, like would you offer a curbside pickup, and would you bill all the curbside pickup properties directly? And maybe would you offer a transfer site like for Go Home Lake? And would you be able to bill Go Home Lake residents directly, because that transfer site would be explicitly earmarked for Go Home Lake? So I think we have the building blocks of solutions. We need to be driving the district to confirm that we can go down this path and we can get this property-based billing model so that we don't try to put it all into a big pot, because if you put it all into a big pot, then we don't have a 49% reduction across the board, and that takes away the opportunity for 55% of our township to solve their own problems through private services, through marinas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I'm not going to have much to add. I just piggybacking on Councillor Hazelton's comments there. I have had discussions with the marina where I park my pleasure craft as opposed to live aboard vessel. And it's the marina happens to be owned by Adrian Conrad. And while I haven't talked to Adrian directly, I'm sure he gave some direction to somebody there, because they approached me. I didn't approach them about private contractors. And so there's a keen interest. All I'm getting at here is there is a keen interest, even from people such as Adrian, by looks of it, to pick up where the district seems to be dropping the ball. And so I've encouraged that marina to talk to private contractors to find out what kind of response they get. I think it's a very good idea. And I'll just add to that I do have close relations that use marinas other than in Honey Harbor and other than in our municipality. Heinsohn's in Penetang takes garbage from anybody that parks their boat there. So just to add to what's been already said, I can't see the MOECP being able to police, or even having the desire to police marinas in that context. So I don't understand where they're coming from on all this in the first place. To me, a boat is a boat, and it seems that the federal government seems to think the same way. Anything that floats is a boat or a vessel. So I like that road that we're going down in that context. I happen to agree with Councillor Hazelton's concept of going to the district, getting their base model costs, and then seeing how we can add things on and do it. Take that approach to it. I realize 6 Mile Lake is an issue, and it's got to be addressed more specifically. But I think this idea of sort of a user pay after we get a significant drop in the cost from the district because they are not dealing with our garbage, and then build up from there, is a very good idea. Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I hate it. And I'm really, really annoyed with MOECP, and more so with district, for not trying to do a workaround with the MOECP, but coming to us directly. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to make a few comments on all this, and then we'll go round two. You know, when I look at our overall township, I'm going to do some really rough calculations here, and I would suggest that roughly 40% of our population take their garbage to marinas that have bins. So I'm not including Go Home Lake, because they don't do that. But and again, this is a real rough ballpark. I'm thinking about 40% are using marinas right now for their waste disposal. About 30% have roadside pickup available to them, ballparking, and that leaves about 30% who are using waste depots or bin sites. So that would include, you know, the Go Home Lake, Gibson Lake, North 6 Mile Lake. They're using bin sites or waste depots. I also note that we, per the district stats, if I understand them correctly, we produce more garbage per resident than other municipalities. And I think that is because many of our current bin sites are being used by contractors, retailers, other businesses, tourist visitors, whatever you want to call it. And you know, the clearest example of that was when you compare the boat club to Nautilus. And the boat club is clearly collecting, I think, as much garbage off the road as they are off their docks, if I can put it that way, because people are taking advantage of convenience of having bins there. And so I think that and while I don't fully agree with Councillor Hazelton, I do agree with most of what he's saying in the future model. Where I don't agree with him is I don't think that getting ECAs for marinas are practical, because the Spirit Marine I think a Spirit Marine example in Bracebridge where they did get an ECA, and yes, they did pay 10 grand, but then they were sold, and the new owner said, "There's no way we're dealing with it. We're canceling the ECA simply because they're insurance companies," and their lawyers said, "Run away as quickly as possible because of the risk you're taking on of having a licensed waste collection site on your property." And you know, and when the marine operators that I've talked to, and yes, I saw your note, Councillor Bocheck, we haven't organized a marina operators committee, but a number of us have talked to a number of different marina operators, so we got a sense at this point. And whether we organize a committee down in the future, we'll have to look at that. But the marina operators I've talked to don't want to have ECAs, don't want to have licensed waste collection sites, but do want to have permission to have bins on the marinas, just like all across the province. We know that there are marinas we have yet, I have yet not, and I know CO Mariotti's done a lot of phone calling as well. We have not yet found a marina outside our municipality, outside the district, where they actively distinguish between, I'll call it, resident boaters versus yachters. Only in the district here are they being told that they're supposed to do that. That's an inconsistency. Now, when see, the last time we talked to MECP, they're arguing that the rest of the province is wrong. But I think that's a impractical and, I believe, incorrect statement. But okay, we got to keep working on that one. I think that it makes perfect sense for those who are taking their waste to marinas, and if we can create an arrangement where they continue to do that privately, it makes perfect sense for them to have a significantly lower tax rate, because they're basically having a model that's very similar to Lake of Bays. All Lake of Bays does is offer, I think it's 4 transfer stations. Simple. You get you take your garbage to the transfer station, but their rates, their taxes are roughly half ours when it comes to waste, because it is a separate item. And I think therefore it's perfectly logical to suggest that that's as you put it, Councillor Hazelton, and I agree with 100%. There's a base rate, and that everybody pays that, just like residents of Lake of Bays, because transfer stations are offered, and you know, and district does have responsibility shared, and per the agreements about you know, operating garbage sites, and also managing the prior waste disposal sites, of which we have a number of them in our township, where they have to monitor them and manage them because people have used them as dumps in the past, and of course they're no longer legal to be used that way. Roadside, I mean, it's easy to identify the properties that get roadside collection, and I think they should be paying for their roadside collection because they're getting an additional service, and I think we know that district provides that at a reasonable rate because they get a quote for the entire district, not just you were not called road by road. And those properties that are served with roadside pickup should be paying for that. And that leaves us with waste depots, and I'm not entirely sure what the most effective way of doing how they should be, if they should be paying any sort of tax that's somewhere between base and roadside. I don't know if a tag system is the way to go or something there. I'm not sure. But I think also what we have to reflect is that in the new waste system that will be implemented sometime in the future, I suspect our volume is going to go down somewhat significantly. And it's going to go down somewhat significantly because there are a lot of, for instance, there are a lot of people now who are using marina waste bins for their commercial, retail, construction, etc. waste. And that they, and if they were in any other municipality, that waste they'd have to take to the transfer station and pay for it as they go across the scales. Or, as Councillor Hazelton mentioned, in some cases, marinas may want to offer the service to neighboring cottagers who have lanes that aren't big enough for roadside pickup. And as you used the example of where I am, there's about 20 of us cottages on the lane. And right now, we are allowed to take our waste to Woods Landing, Woods Marina, because it's the district provided service. That service would disappear, and then, as I've already discussed with the owners there, I would have the option of paying them a fee to take my garbage there versus driving down the highway to a transfer station. But because I in effect would then become a customer of that marina. But I think, you know, I think what we're all saying in many ways is that's the sort of a model we want to go to. That district provides us with transfer stations, district provides us with waste depots, a few waste depots and roadside, but we create a billing system somehow that reflects the fact that you know, close to half our residents are only paying for the transfer stations because they're not getting a waste depot or roadside pickup. And we'd have to work the details out on that model, but I think to me that makes sense as a way to go. Round two. I see different hands now than I saw before. Yeah, no, I mentioned that we've talked to numerous marina operators, but not all. Okay, I'm going to go on the hands I see now because I did see Councillor Bochek's hand, but it's disappeared. Okay, so feel free to join the second round if you decide, but we're going to start with Councillor Cooper, followed by Predco and Graziano, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and a lot of great comments. It's a complex issue for sure. When I made my initial remarks, I was really responding to some of the things that you talked about initially, Mayor, and I didn't really state any position as to where I fall on this issue. But I wanted to sort of glean some information before I came forward with any thoughts. And I still don't have all of it. One of the things that we need to find out, and I'm mentioning this to both our CAO Mariotti and to Commissioner Steele, is that I'm not sure how they came to the conclusion as to what option one would cost. And the reason I raise that is that if the assumption for number one is that all the waste would go through the transfer stations, it would be a inaccurate calculation considerably, because we know that if we go with privatization in the marinas, 40 or even maybe 50% of the waste would not be going through the transfer station. So I'd be curious if it was calculated on our current use, that's one thing. If it's calculated on all of the waste going through there, that might give us a completely different number. In other words, is it a lot lower than it's showing under number one? So there's a question that I think needs to be dealt with. I don't know whether James Steele can answer that today, but he is in attendance. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. I have a couple of more things, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor.
No, and my recollection of when they offer that information is they were using the same volume of waste as has been collected in the past. So in other words, they didn't calculate any reduction because that would only have been that would have been speculative. So they costed things out using the same volume that's been collected in the past.
If that's the case, that's certainly fine. But if it was to take over all the waste because that was the only option available, it is inaccurate. So we just need to know that for sure. So I raise that maybe to CAO Mariotti to follow up if he wouldn't mind. Just a couple of other quick things. I guess basically a few things around sort of fairness has been raised here, and I think fairness needs to be an operative word for getting a solution. In other words, fairness to our constituents, whereby they pay for what they get. The term that we're using is user pay, but actually in the Municipal Act, there's a specific term. It's beneficiary pays. And there's a distinction. They're two different things. They're both defined in the Municipal Act. So we need to call it the beneficiary pays. And that's not going to be easy to get to, but it may be if we privatize things. So that may be a way to go. I think the three sort of categories of service that we've discussed, one of the ones that's going to be the most complicated and hard to manage and expensive for those communities that have them are the bin sites. The unmanaged bin sites will be and may continue to be a very big issue, especially something that's close to Highway 400 where anybody under the sun can drop in and leave garbage. So I think we need to be mindful of that. I'm not saying they have to be removed, but I think the MOECP might say they have to be removed. And I think the district might say they have to be removed. So we need to think about that. I do believe that one of the ways we can get to sort of a final outcomes and a final solution is to start with the base service, which everybody has talked about. I'm a big supporter of the concept that everybody pays for a transfer station, because all of us at one time or another may need access to a transfer station because of some materials that we have on our properties. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And if some people choose to drive their garbage like Lake of Bays to a transfer station, so be it. That's fair. Everybody gets that service. But if I have to tell my community that they're not only going to pay their marina $300 or $400 more a year to have a bin site at that marina, but they're going to also have to pay for bin sites that are on Highway 400. Why would they have to do that when they're already their taxes would have covered off the marina costs, and now they've got to add to it? That doesn't make sense. So I think that's why we need to start with a base and then layer on the services that various communities, not roads, single roads, but various communities might need. So there may be in Ward 3 three types of service. One might be roadside, one might be marina, and so forth. So I just throw that out. I think in fairness, we have to remember that we can't, with this removal of service in the marinas, and if it goes privatized, it becomes privatized. It's only fair that the base service is charged to those constituents, and then they pay their extra fees to the marina. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Predko.
Thank you. And through your worship, I think we're all kind of congealing on the same notion of a base fare and a levy for additional service. And I think that works well across the township in that we have a very diverse township and everybody has very specific needs. I can see there being a roadside collection type levy that would go to people who got roadside collection, as long as we're able to identify those. And then a separate type of levy for a depot type collection, which might be South Gibson and might be Go Home Lake. And then I think we just also, I don't see, I still see a problem that we don't have a universal solution for the people who are on the coastal waters, that not all marinas may offer the same service. They might not all opt in. So are we making are we how do we solve the problem on the outer shores? And that part worries me a little bit. But we also do have a few people on private roads along Lake Joseph Road over towards MacTier that don't have curbside, and they don't have a bin site, so they would just be charged what we're talking about as the base fee, which I think they would appreciate being recognized as receiving less service, and they don't have another option other than to go to the Tower Road station. So I think this approach works. I think we just need to have a good solid plan for how we manage the people who use marinas and bin sites today that we think is viable and fair for the longer term. So I am very optimistic that we're moving in a good direction, but I hope we have more conversation on how to solve the marina problems concretely. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano.
Thank you, Worship. Bear with me. I'm just going to come on video here. Here we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to deal with my cold at the same time. Frankly speaking, based on what I've heard and comments that were made, this two-tier system that's being proposed is bad policy. It's just simply bad policy. The question that I have is, where do we draw the line? So if today we're going to make it a two-tier system where everyone has to pay to play for their respective services, where do we stop? Do we charge MacTier residents more because they have arena? Do we charge those in Honey Harbor more because they have 6 pickleball courts where I have none? Do we charge people in Port Severn more because they have Baxter Hall or the community center there and a dog park? Where do we draw the line here? Where do we draw the distinction and say two-tier system doesn't work? If we're going to do garbage and we're going to offer this as a service through the municipality, we have to do so in a way that's fair to all. And yeah, unfortunately, some areas are going to have to subsidize others. I look at MacTier as an example. If they have to pay for curbside pickup, their taxes are going to increase. Are they going to be happy? I mean, they're predominantly curbside pickup. So it's just bad policy. And if council feels that this is the prudent way to go, whereby we charge residents for whatever decision or choice that they make, and people can individually opt out on roads and others can individually opt in, what kind of chaos is that going to be now? Because now you've got a provider who's going to go curbside pickup, and Jane Doe says, yes, I'll get you to pick it up and I'll pay that $50 more. And Jack Doe next door says, no, I'm not. So then that garbage man is going to have to rail it. Oh, Jack Doe, I don't pick up. Jane Doe, I do. Jill Doe, perhaps, kind of unsure. And so what does that look like for our community when you got the ability to opt in or opt out? Or is it forced opt-in? Meaning that you are eligible for curbside pickup, therefore you're going to pay that premium, regardless of whether or not you want to take it to a transfer station or not. Just really bad policy. But if we do go down this path, I hope that before council makes a decision, we bring the general public to council to have their voice present and listen to them, not as in individuals, rather collectively through some kind of community engagement or open forum. Because we should hear the community and what their thoughts are and whether or not they want to pay individual prices for the services that they've come to already receive. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. CEO Mariotti.
Thank you, Mayor Kutia. I just wanted to briefly respond to Councillor Cooper's question about the costing. So, and as you alluded to it, Mayor Kutia, the costing was based on 2023's numbers, just to, at least there were some hard numbers that the district could work with to make a comparison with the different options. And of course, we all know that those numbers would be a worst case scenario because they include a lot of the wastage, if you like, a lot of the extra garbage that is generated by allowing unsupervised marina bin sites in our township. So if anything, those numbers would even improve over and above those options that have been costed out.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, Mayor Kotzer. And I wanted to speak before, but I didn't have my thoughts quite together on this. But I think I do now. My interpretation of the District of Muskoka is that they are an agency that takes all 6 municipalities together and shares the costs of services. We find that last night in MacTier that there's a new PRU type of thing that's going to be rolling out there. Those costs are astronomical for ambulances, for the services, for everything else. That is a shared responsibility of the district. In other words, Huntsville, Gravenhurst, and Bracebridge will be subsidizing this over in MacTier. That's what the district is for, is to share costs. The revenues generated from the MacTier area would come nowhere near covering the cost of this ambulance unit. So my question is, and I know we have James Steele on the as a part of this, is why is not garbage and solid waste part of the same formula that's used for every other district service? And we are not gaining subsidies from the Highway 11 corridor when it comes to solid waste, but we do for every other service that we receive from the District of Muskoka. And this is something that I think that needs to be addressed. We're a smaller township. We have less revenues being generated by our tax base. And in all other aspects of district services, the costs are shared amongst the 6 municipalities. I really think we need to look at this formula here and see if we can't get subsidies from the rest of the District of Muskoka to help us with our solid waste issues over here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, do you wish to respond?
Sure, happy to do so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. And thank you for the question, Councillor Wojcik, and through you, Mayor Kutsier. So the answer is Georgian Bay is being subsidized for its waste management, but it's not universal. So it's not for all the services. So things like disposal diversion, things like curbside and non-curbside with respect to transfer stations, those are blended rates that apply to all area municipalities. Things like depots and bin sites are 100% the cost of each area municipality that's hosting those facilities. And so the answer I would say is that it depends. And where that comes from is the waste levy that was developed back, I believe, 7 or 8 years ago. And I'm probably quoting that wrong, but the waste levy was executed by a committee of district council, a special waste management levy committee, and that was as a result of excuse me, the upload from the area municipalities, and everyone was at the table to say what's a fair and equitable way of distributing the costs. And so that's the levy we work with. That's the district council approved methodology for calculating it. I think it's important also to comment on the question about having special area levies or having special folks who receive certain parts of the service paying more or less. That's not the way the levy is calculated. It's a universal and it's a universal level levy that is just like taxation. That gets allocated based on the total assessment, and each property's assessment splits out their portion of the cost. So the suggestion perhaps to make folks who say receive curbside have a higher rate, and folks who do not receive curbside have a lower rate. That's not something that the model contemplates, and that's not the approved methodology for calculating the taxation or the levy calculation. Not to say that it couldn't change, but it's not something that can easily be done, because I'll say that my understanding is to get to where we are today on that levy calculation and an agreement amongst all the municipalities was 6 to 7 years of conversations. And so it was a very long road to get to where we are. I'm not saying it's perfect. Could it be updated? Could it be changed? Sure, if that's the will of district council. But your comments are well understood and heard. Is it appropriate? Perhaps the one thing that we're looking at through the solid waste master plan is, once we've evaluated what the future services look like across the district, is it time to relook at the levy, especially with things like producer responsibility? So that changes the calculation substantially. And so is there a different way, or is there a different methodology to come to a fair and reasonable outcome for all area municipalities? And I think someone mentioned it, but it's one total value. So someone is going to have a lower price, but someone also is going to have a higher price. And so what's going to be important if you change it is you got to get everyone at the table to agree that that's the fair way to distribute it. And I suspect there'll be some challenges for the folks that are on the losing end of that conversation. So I hope that answers your question, but I'm happy to provide additional information if you think that's needed.
Thank you. I'd like to actually respond to that as well in part. Right now, waste collection is part of the rate-supported budget, which also includes water and sewer, whereas most services are under the tax-supported budget. And as Councillor Graziano was referring to earlier, a tax-supported budget means it's the costs are spread out based on assessment, as opposed to based on let me call it the beneficiary pay, I think is how Councillor Cooper is suggesting we should talk. But I wanted to make one observation, Commissioner Steele, and that is, we know that there are a few members, a few residents in our area who actually get a reduction in their rate-supported waste levy because they're not getting roadside pickup. And so, and that happens to be the condominium, part of the condominium group at Oak Bay, because their roads aren't big enough to allow the garbage truck to go through to pick up the garbage pick. And so they actually, I mean, it's a minute reduction, but they actually get a reduction. So we know it is certainly possible to identify segments. And I think, and I want to further to Councillor Graziano's remark, waste is a separate item, and it's listed separately on our property bill. It's not a general, how should I put it? It's not like the general tax where we have services, and we know that, like any municipal services, some people take advantage of certain services more than others, or some, have, some areas have certain advantages, some have certain disadvantages. That's just the nature of any municipality. But I do believe that, I do believe, even though it's not, I'll call it the norm right now, having a distinction between those who have roadside pickup and those who don't can be done. I also, when I did my calculations, I figured that the average person, the tax rate for waste, if we went to transfer stations only, would be roughly half. I mean, we're ballparking now because we don't know how it's all going to unfold. And that if you took that roughly half and added in the cost for roadside pickup for those who are qualify for roadside pickup, they still wouldn't be paying the same tax they are paying now, because we're paying a heck of a lot of extra tax, because bin collection, which should be more economical simply because everybody's bringing the garbage to a common site, is actually more expensive the way it's been structured than roadside. It's one of those weird things. And so I do believe, in spite of your comments, Commissioner Steele, that we in our township, given our unique situation where 70% of our residents roughly will never get roadside pickup, that it makes sense to have, let me call it at least a two-tiered waste levy, because it is a separate item on our tax bill, the waste levy. It's not all blended in with everything else. And I can't help but make the observation as well that in sense of fairness, our township pays more district taxes than we collect in services in total. I mean, that's just a reality. And so we have to try to get more fairness as we go along. And I think this is one opportunity where we can get some more fairness once we can narrow down what we actually want to do. And I think we're getting closer. So I'm going to start round 3. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and around we go. I just would like to, I think you more or less said it, but I just wanted to repeat that there are going to be some perceived unfairnesses, if that's a word, but in reality, people are paying for these services now. So there's seems to be some misunderstanding about what they've got now and how much they're paying. And if the services are say reduced, for example, their taxes go down, and everybody's taxes will go down if we go with option 1, for example, and then layer in some other things. Even if you layer in roadside, and so you have a 2-tier system, it's a 2-tier pricing system, then it's still their taxes should be the same or lower. They'd more or less have to be. So there seems to be some misunderstanding as to there's going to be some sort of unfairness about that. There won't be. In fact, it'll be quite fair if we find a way to be a little bit more along the lines of beneficiary pays as opposed to not. So I just wanted to reinforce that point, that it's the system can be very fair, and I think we're all going to be working to that end. What would not be fair is to expect the 40% to not only pay extra fees at their marina and not have a tax reduction because they're going to pay the same as somebody that has roadside and has this and has that. Well, that's not fair. That's introducing unfairness into the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton. You can call this round 2 for yourself if you like, because you didn't speak in round 2.
Thank you. And I realized I left my microphone on, so hopefully I wasn't making noises along the way. On a little bit of a tangent, I was watching a little video clip last night, and it was Ronald Reagan, and the question that was being asked to him was about government doing things, and his comment is government needs to get out of the business. Businesses need to do the business. And I essentially couldn't agree more. If you look at the costs that the district charges us, and then you compare that to what private services could do, it'll be a fraction of the cost of what the district charges us. So across the board, we need to be looking at different strategies. We've heard, the concept of a 2-tier waste tax. Well, let me tell you something. The lift companies that could do the bin service, they would also do roadside pickup, and they'd probably do it for a fraction of what the cost is that the district charges us. But again, it's an all or nothing situation. So it's either all properties on a road that is a candidate road, or none of the properties on a candidate road. And the district has already told us that, but just reconfirming, our ability to get rid of waste is there are lots of options. And the comment was made earlier, perhaps we need to be exploring these options. And I know from what I've heard, the mayor and several of our councillors have explored these options. There are lots of options. And the comments that I've just heard, the last couple of speakers, fairness. 55% of our township is water only access. If for some reason we went to a model where the water only access properties were paying for roadside, subsidizing the roadside pickup, we would have mutiny, we would have whatever the right terminology is, but we would have an insurrection. There we go. But you know, we need to find a way to get to a state that is fair. And the comments that have been made over and over again here are, if we go to option one, everybody's taxes that is waste related tax drops by, call it 50%. Now we all have money to go and do something on a private basis, or maybe even contract with a district. I don't care who does it personally, but we have options that become available. And so I think what's important for us today is, as I understand it from Mr. Steele, the district is meeting next week. They need to hear what our council's interests are. And I can't imagine any option that could be considered fair other than option one, from which we then build out whatever additional services various communities may want. So I think we need to provide that kind of direction to the district. And in the process of doing that, additionally ask them what additional services would they be interested in offering, and how do we go about dealing with that on a property-based charge, not a tax assessment, because that seems to be more mill rate. But we currently have examples of property-based charges, and we need to accelerate that path. And if the district can't offer it, then I suggest that we go exclusively to over and above the transfer sites to private services. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We had a business owner here just last week, Morris from Severn Marina. Morris called the district of Muskoka and asked them to remove the bins from his property that he wanted to put in private bins. And he now has private bins, and I believe it's a profit center for him. He was the one that instigated it and asked for the bins to be removed so he could come up with a plan. So that's my one thought. The other thought that I've had over the past 6 months is, I'm a councillor at the Township of Georgian Bay, and I don't know what each property owner is paying for solid waste. Am I paying $5 a month, $100 per month? What am I as a property owner paying for the solid waste, the total solid waste, because it's obviously shared between our residents? Can James or anyone else give me an answer on, perhaps Councillor Hazelton knows the answer, but.
Yeah, it's in the budget that the district produces as to how much the township is paying. And then each individual on their tax bill has a separate line for waste levy.
Right, but my question that I would like to know is, we're talking about subsidies, I just heard that the island population are subsidizing the curbside pickup, and I've heard the opposite. I would just like to get clarity. If I have to go research it myself and take what we're paying the district and divide it between the number of properties in our township, I'll come up with that figure.
Okay, I mean, but just for your information.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, is that right now, the current system is that everybody, with the exception of one condo in Oak Bay, is paying the same waste levy, but based on the mill rate. So if your property is worth twice as much as your neighbor, you're paying twice as much property tax for the waste. So everybody, whether they get roadside pickup or they are the farthest away from any marina, are paying the same mill rate for waste collection. So at this point, you could argue that those who use marinas are subsidizing roadside pickup. But at the same time, you could argue those who roadside pickup are subsidizing the cottagers, because right now they're paying for the bins at marinas, which we know is an expensive service.
Correct, and that's why I was trying to come up with a figure, and I will find out, because many of us that have permanent residence and roadside pickup do not use it, because we have bears and our truck comes down our road at 7:10 when it's still dark out. So the bears get into the garbage and rip it all apart, you know. So there's lots of questions to be answered about the level of service, the cost of service, and a number of issues. But I pay for curbside pickup and I don't use it. My neighbors pay for curbside pickup and they don't use it. We take it up to the Baxter Ward at the time of day where the bears aren't going to eat it, because that truck goes down at 7 o'clock in the morning.
But you don't pay for curbside pickup. Everyone pays for your curbside pickup.
That's
Just
right.
like everyone pays for the marina bins at this point.
Sure, but if the truck goes down my street and there's 25 houses on my street, the first truck goes down at 7 o'clock, picks up a half a dozen houses. That's it. Then the second truck an hour later goes down the street and picks up the green bins because they don't use the food composters. I just find it to be a ridiculous waste of time, effort, and money to drive all the way from Bracebridge, come down to my street, pick up 6 people's garbage out of 25, and then continue on. Yet everybody's paying the same
Well,
for solid waste. So I'm
You-
not sure the formula is
well,
great.
that then you can consider the call it the Lake of Bays model, where there's no roadside pickup whatsoever. That is one model that's on the list as an option for us.
Which we had for my entire life in Port Severn. We never had curbside pickup. But we did have bins at the end of Long Pine Road, and we did have bins all over the place,
Yeah.
so neighborhoods could use those bins. Curbside was developed because those bins were removed.
And those bins were removed because they were grossly abused
Yes.
in many cases.
Yeah, oh, I don't disagree with that, but somewhere in here there's a formula, but I see of a lot of inefficiencies, and that's why I brought up the Morris thing from Severn Marina, who's a typical example that had the district come and remove those bins, because he was tired of the neighborhood people dropping it in there, coming in, there's potholes, there's everything else created by the neighborhood, and he just decided, no, he's going to have his marina patrons use his bins and add it to their dockage fee, and it's working out fantastic for him. So I think my reason for getting all the marina operators together in a room is to talk about the different methods that they think will work. And I think it's of great value for us to bring those folks together. A lot of them are probably smarter than us when it comes to solid waste.
And a lot of them would rather do it privately than through the district.
I believe you're correct. Thank you.
Councilor Predko.
Thank you, and through your worship. Yeah, just going back to, trying to be fair. I don't think, as an option, it's really viable for us to only look at option number with the two option one with the 2 transfer stations in a vacuum of a plan for how to manage service levels and service expectations that have been established in the inland communities and in the towns where there is curbside pickup. And I don't think we can go on an assumption that people will individually get a private service or get a road association to hire a private service. I think that would be asking for chaos on our roads for garbage pickup time. So I am for fairness, but I think we have to pick a service level that will meet the service expectations of our community, but figure out how to way that we can do something to whether it's provide a discount or provide a levy to some the communities that are not getting the full service that other areas are getting. Thank you.
No, and I'd like to follow up on that in that I think not only do we have to look at fairness, and I don't think fairness to not only our residents, but as importantly, in my opinion, our responsibility to responsible waste collection, our responsibility to the environment, the roadside areas. If we, if we were to go to a model of 2 transfer stations, full stop, done, I think we're being irresponsible to our environment as well as to our residents. But I also think that we have to look at the fact that if we can get private service at marinas for a good chunk of our residents. And I'm guessing it would be 40%, because for instance, as has been pointed out, there are some marinas that have no interest in providing that service for their customers. We have to also give opportunity to residents who are not marina users or are using marinas that don't have that service to place their garbage, I'll call it, somewhere closer to home than driving to the two existing transfer stations. And I think, I personally believe that having at least a couple of waste depots is wise. And I also think offering roadside pickup is wise. But I think it's very important that if we offer roadside pickup, in my opinion, it has to be an all or nothing. In other words, sorry, Councillor Bocek, but if you're on a road that has roadside pickup, you're paying for it whether you use it or not, because we can't go door to door. But I also think that we have to look at how, we've talked about this before, and I think for roadside pickup and for waste depots, having something like a bag tag system or something that controls the volume to some degree so that individuals can't abuse the system, I think is important. And so, for instance, and I'm just making this up, because if Councillor Bocek, as a taxpayer with roadside pickup, is given 50 bag tags because he's allowed to put out a bag a week, and it might only be 25, I don't know what the number will be, but or you might use them when you're going to the transfer station, because they might say you need a bag tag to use the transfer station, so you don't pay a fee. I don't know, but what I'm sensing here, and by the way, I plan after this I'm going to let Councillor Hazelton speak because he didn't get into round two, but then I'm going to call a break so that we have a washroom break or whatever you want, bio break or whatever term you prefer. I think we're getting actually relatively close to a model so that we can then focus on that model and get the details of how it's going to actually work. And I think that'll be if we can make that progress today, then I think good, then we can go away and do some more homework, but we have it a little more focused. Councillor Hazelton.
Oh, I thank you. I'm a light bulb moment just went on a few minutes ago. You said that there is a unique treatment for Oak Bay residents because they can't get a garbage truck down the road. So what that tells me is we have a formula existing and a method existing in the district today that accommodates adjustments in our waste levy. So I just heard comments that from other councillors that and perhaps you, Mayor, that potentially we want to have a bigger solution than just the two transfer stations. So here's some interesting math. Two transfer stations are a 49% reduction. Doing the roadside service and the other bin sites or transfer depots or whatever you want to call them is an 18% reduction. That's a 31% difference, which is fine. So the model then should say all of the properties that are water only access and not Go Home Lake or 6 Mile Lake. In other words, all the Bayside properties will have a 31% reduction in their waste taxes, because that way they're not paying for the special services for Go Home Lake, the special services for 6 Mile Lake, and the special services for all the roadside. In other words, those depots and those roadside pickups have zero value to the district for the water only access properties on the bay. So fine, we have this mechanism in place. I would support going with option 3 with a 31% reduction for all of on the waste tax for all of the water only access properties in the bay. That way, it's a very simple solution. The mechanism is in place today. We just go in and plug in that 31% for all of the water-only access properties on the bay. And that allows the inland lakes to, and the inland lakes of 6 Mile Lake and Go Home Lake to have their transfer depots. And it allows all of the roadside people to have their roadside pickup. That then becomes financially fair. And then all of the water-only access properties are back to essentially that 49% reduction in taxes, and they have money available to go with a private service.
Commissioner Steele.
Thank you, Mayor Coutier, and I know we're going on a break, so I'll be very brief. I just wanted to sort of go back on your comment about the rebates that are provided to condominium owners. And so they're very specific, very narrow conditions on which those applications are reviewed. And it is, and briefly, it's related to buildings that are on a collection route and where they have more than 4 units, which is the maximum allowable in the bylaw. Any units above the 4 units can apply for a decrease in their taxation. I can't speak specifically to Oak Bay because I'm not familiar with those rebates, but I'm presuming they would have followed that same direction because there is a specific council direction to consider that. So I think that's just the first clarification that I wanted to offer. So thank you for bringing that up. And then to Councillor Hazelton's comment, I think, well, I guess what I would say is the math doesn't quite work that way. You can't, if you say gave more of a rebate to the folks who did not have curbside or that were island properties, then those net costs would be applied to the folks the balance of the folks. So it's not that all of a sudden those costs disappear. There's a total amount that needs to be recovered through the budget. And so what it would mean is that the folks that were, say not island properties or not water access properties, perhaps their rates would double. And so I think you just have to keep that into, I'm not saying the potential solution is wrong. You just have to understand that the dollars have to come from somewhere. And so if you take it from one pocket, you've got to put it in the other pocket to make sure that they all add up. Now, there will be some variables because, there are some, perhaps if you're removing curbside in certain areas, perhaps that reduces the cost to provide that service, and then that could reduce the budgetary amounts. But just to be clear, the amounts that are included in the budget are to provide the current level of service, and the 2025 proposed budget includes the scenario number 3 budgetary costs. And so, if you were to move the money around, if that's the will of Georgian Bay Council and District Council, of course, because they're the ones that make the final decision, the total cost will be similar. It would just be allocated more in one than perhaps they're paying now, less on others that are perhaps paying now. So I just wanted to provide that clarity because the total value, the total cost to provide that service doesn't necessarily change based on how you allocate those costs. And so there will be winners and losers if you choose to modify the way the costs are allocated, if I'm understanding you correctly.
So it was a nice idea, but sadly it won't work. And option 1 now becomes the only solution that could possibly allow us to get out a path to introduce fairness, where we take a base level service and then selectively across communities in the township choose to provide our communities a better service.
I think I want to make a couple comments. One is just for everybody's awareness that yes, the one condo in Oak Bay is getting a discount. It is a minute discount. We're talking a few dollars. Like it's a ridiculously low. Like it's nowhere near the cost of providing a roadside pickup per address. So just for information it's barely worth noting, but the reality is it is there. And I think that if we are going down that path, it is something that we'd have to explore how we could best affect this and how we could do the calculations. But I'd also want to point out that if we're going down that road, actually, the total budget that Commissioner Steele referred to, it would actually be reduced because it would imply that bins are being removed. Therefore, bin service costs are being removed. Therefore, our budget would be going down before we were trying to work it out. I want to take this break, and then when we come back, we'll go to Councillor Graziano, followed by Councillor Cooper, please. Getting back to trash talk, and Councillor Graziano, you're up.
We want to wait for everyone to join.
Go ahead, please.
I've heard comments in the term fair be used multiple times throughout the course of this conversation. But then in the same breath, I've heard people say it's all or nothing for those that would have to be a part of some additional cost model. And the term fair and attempting to be fair while also at the same breath stating that it's that someone would have to pay for it regardless of whether or not they use the service or not is not by definition fair. So on one hand, we can't say, well, it's going to be fair for a small or 40% of the Bay Area people, you know, however, at the expense of those inland and those that are receiving curbside pickup, because they may elect out of receiving curbside pickup, but still have to pay for it just because that's our definition of fair. So again, I'm going to reiterate that this two-tier model is bad policy. It's just not going to work, regardless of how we decide to move forward. But we continue to talk and talk at length with regards to this issue, and yet we have not yet instructed staff to go to market and see what it would cost us and what options are available to us through a third-party provider. And in the absence of that, we are going to continue to talk at length and try to figure out a solution that is only having us focus on a relationship and a partnership with district rather than investigating and exploring other options. And so I'm going to reiterate again, the prudent approach here, at least in my opinion, is to have perfect and receive perfect information so we can assess what options we have, what options are available, at what cost across all of the different service providers that provide this type of service to us. So I'm going to reiterate again that I'd like to see direction from council today, requesting that staff put out an RFP to determine what we can do and how much it's going to cost us through other providers. With respect to fair, when we're talking about fairness, let's not talk about all or nothing for the others that are not going to be, you know, benefiting from a reduction in rates because they're receiving roadside pickup. And lastly, I do want to remind the community, or excuse me, council rather, that there are other water access properties inland as well. It's not just the bay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And my goodness, I find I'm agreeing with not only our previous speaker, but with you, Mayor, just before we broke. You raised something that was very wise in terms of understanding what's going on here. And that is that if we took even option 3, our costs would go down significantly because we're getting rid of the bins at the marinas. So this concept and misunderstanding that people are going to be paying additional costs is I think fallacious. I think it's inaccurate description of what's happening here. I don't think there's a full understanding of the implications. I happen to think we'd be smarter to go with option 1.
Give me the paper towel.
Pardon me?
Apologies, guys. My apologies.
I think we'd be smart to go with option 1 because that's a very sort of clear base number. And remember that if you want X services and the district will provide them, that you're probably going to end up paying probably less than you were before. You've been subsidizing all those bins, especially ones on the bay at the marinas. Those won't be a cost to us, to our waste services anymore. So I just think there's not a clear understanding of what you were talking about, Mr. Mayor. But I think you're absolutely right. The overall cost will have to go down if we remove all those bins from the marinas. And so we need to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing other hands at the moment. I'm going to fill the void briefly. And what I'm hearing, in my mind, I'm hearing a couple of very clear messages. Clear message number one, continue working, I was going to say with, but maybe it's against, but continue working on the legality issues around marina bins. Because I think all of us are in agreement that we understand that the district has to remove their bins from the marinas based on MECP rules and regulations. But we do not understand why and by the way, we do understand that marinas can get private bins in, because even right now, for instance, a marina that serves only cottagers, they also generate garbage within their operations. And, it'd be perfectly legal for them to ask a provider, a service provider, to put a bin behind their shop to collect their personal or their business garbage. The fact that they're supposed to distinguish between which other customers are, for lack of a better word, what cottagers versus yachters, to me, is something we have to pursue, because I don't think that makes any sense. And I think we got enough agreement on council here to continue that work. And for your information, Councillor Graziano, you made reference about utilizing Minister Smith. I have contacted Minister Smith. I hope to be speaking with him actually later today and as a follow-up. So yes, we are pursuing that route as a possibility. The second thing that I'm hearing from everyone, one way or another, is that staff pursue getting a little more information on, let me call it private service costing or getting quotes. If the township, and this is if in capital letters, if the township is going to take on some collection responsibilities themselves, to get some idea of what costs might be incurred. I'm not sure what we'll find out. And I'll use the example of a roadside pickup. I imagine that if we got a quote for roadside pickup within the township, it would be significantly higher per address than using the district for that service, simply because the district gets a quote for a much larger service area, a much higher number of addresses than we have in the township. I think we also have to consider, and I think we can inquire of district as one possible provider, how we service areas like, and the most significant example is Go Home Lake, where the marinas are not interested in serving their customers with waste. And at this point, my understanding from district is they would like to try lakeside pickup. But I believe, and I don't think I'm the only one to believe, that actually the best long-term solution for Go Home Lake would be a waste depot of some description. In other words, taking the bins and getting them to the waste depot level, such as that we have in a couple other places, Gibson Lake and Honey Harbor, so that the residents have an opportunity to dispose of their garbage at more hours than would simply be provided by lakeside pickup. And because I think, I'll call it physically, the idea of having, what is it, 400, roughly 400 residents going through a narrow channel and parking at a dock that has capacity for what, 3 or 4 boats if they're not too big. It's hard to imagine that working for a period of time when a few trucks are parked there to pick up their waste. Anyway, so I still see the services that we provide to our residents falling in 4 broad, as I said, 4 broad categories. I don't think anybody's argued with the 4 broad categories. One being those who are go through marinas. The second category being those who have roadside pickup potential. The third category being those that fall outside those 2 categories, so they would be like waste depot or transfer station service. And the fourth category being those who are now using the services that are, but they're not putting residential garbage in, they're putting in commercial or retail or what have you, and who should be taking it to a waste depot or for a fee or a transfer station. Those are our 4 broad categories. I think we also need to have a discussion, and we're not going to have it successfully today because it's too involved, but we have to talk about how we tax for those services, whether we continue with the one level serves all regardless of, whether they get whether they have to pay an extra fee at a marina or not, if that ends up being viable. And I think we have to discuss that a little bit. But I do think, and further, I have no interest personally in telling district by the end of today, before next meeting, what we're going to do, because we're nowhere near having anything close to a final plan. But I also think that the only reason that there was any pressure to do that is because they're setting the budget. But in my experience in budgets, just like master plans or anything else, they evolve. And anybody who thinks they're predicting the future and casting in stone is being foolish. Things will evolve. And I think we have to, district will provide status quo until we or they make changes, and they don't have, they say the bins will be gone by December 2025. That gives us a year. And I think we within that year, and I hope less than that year, we will narrow down the services that we will be receiving from district in the latter 2025 and certainly 2026. But I think, I think that with this discussion, we have a number of things that we are going to pursue further to continue narrowing it down. I'm going to go to Councillor Bochek, followed by Cooper in a moment. But I think we're getting closer, and we got to keep working on this because I really do think that we have to come up with a solution that is effective and to some degree fair. And with that, we'll go to Councillor Bochek, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to stand today and just speak for the residents in wards 1 and 3, and I'm going to reach out to the councillors in wards 1 and 3 and get their independent views on this. But as far as curbside pickup goes in Port Severn and Mactier, we have to realize that we're dealing with an aged population. We're dealing with a lot of people that don't have driver's licenses. They have no option. They have to put their garbage out to their curbside. And I even see that in my neighborhood. Senior citizens that don't have driver's license, they have to put their curbside garbage out. So when you look at a town or a small community like Mactier, those services are vitally important, the curbside pickup. Speaking for them in Ward 1 and 3, I would like to see the curbside pickup stay status quo, but I think there is room to move on construction waste and marina sites, and I think that's where we need to focus our efforts, is specifically to those. I will gather the information from my 2 ward councillors on their thoughts so that I can speak educated at the district about this through their views. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted, I know I've said this before, but I think we need to keep reminding ourselves. I started in January of 2015 trying to get information from our Director of Finance at the time, who is now CAO at the district, with respect to a breakdown to the costs of our solid waste, because I immediately identified, coming from our township, that our costs were very high. And I thought we should figure out a way through that. This is fast forward, how many years? 9 years later, and we're getting heat from the district to make a decision. I'm sorry. We just got some financial information and numbers a very short time ago, and we have to work through this issue. So we need time. And the only thing I will say is that there has been, I understood, in terms of the bin removal process, that there's, and Commissioner Steele can clarify this, but that we have to have some of them are going to start being removed as early as February or March or something. So very early on, not the end of the year, Mr. Mayor. I don't think that's correct, but maybe I'm wrong. I just think there's a lot of heat being put on us, and we've had very little time to work through this problem. So I suggest that we take an appropriate amount of time. We don't need to waste time, but we need to understand all the issues, including some of the misunderstanding about people's taxes going up or down. I don't think we've got a very clear picture on that either. Thank you. Commissioner
Steele.
Thank you, Mayor Coutier, and through you to Councillor Cooper. Just to answer your question, the plan was to start removing the bins throughout next year, so that it would be a measured approach to have them removed in a way that we could manage the changes in the community. There's certainly an option to pull them all at the end of the year, but I suspect that would be a lot more disruptive to the public. Certainly flooding, I fully suspect that flooding everyone on this call's phones without an understanding of a detailed communication plan, and I think I shared that at our committee meeting last month, is that, I think what we would like to do is, if we got direction from district council to proceed, we would like to put together a comprehensive communication plan, let folks know what's happening, provide them with options, and receive their feedback on alternative services, and do it in a way that is practical and feasible to minimize the impact. I'm not saying it's not going to be impactful, but it would minimize the impact to the community. If they all were to sort of be pulled, say December next year, I suspect that would be a lot more challenging for the residents, and certainly a lot more impactful on everyone involved. So I just share that as a comment. Yeah, if that helps.
My only follow-up to you, Commissioner Steele, before I go to Councillor Predko, is that for a significant portion of our marina users, their boats will have been put away in December, so they won't notice the impact until the following spring. But that doesn't mean we want to hide what's going on. So I think you're absolutely right. Communication, whatever changes take place, communication will be hugely important, as we've learned in the past. Councillor Predko, please.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. As we're talking about going into 2025 and the plan with, whether it's scenario 3 or whatever, scenario 3 includes the lakeside collection option for, I'm assuming, places like Go Home Lake and along Honey Harbor and other areas. And we don't, if we're worried about the viability of this short-term or long-term, my question really would be to Commissioner Steele, what opportunity do we have to make changes to what scenario 3 means at this date, as you're going to council for your budget approval for 2025. How can we have assurance that our collection will be not a work in progress as we go through the summer? Thank you.
Commissioner Steele, perhaps if you could speak to Go Home Lake specifically, if you've put any plans in place for transition there.
Yeah, so thank you, Mayor Kutzer, through you to Councillor Predko. And I apologize, I'm off on the side here because the sun's coming right in my window and I can't see anyone on Zoom. So that's why I'm off to the side. But so I think we've had a number of conversations about Go Home Lake in particular, and certainly Councillor Predko's raised some logistical challenges with the potential lakeside collection. What I would say is we've received a number of surveys from members of that community telling us when they use the site, we'll understand sort of quantities and numbers. I think there will be logistical challenges just based on the layout of the site. I think we'll look at how to best manage it. But the critical part of, or at least in my opinion, I think the critical piece is as we deliver a lakeside service, we'll be able to have a better understanding of what the actual usage is. And I'll give you an example. So Cashy Lake is a large community in Gravenhurst. 350 people are served by the lakeside location. And we heard the exact same things. It's impossible to get in. No one's going to be able to get to the dock, et cetera, et cetera. We started off with a lengthy lakeside event there on a weekend, found that it was well attended and well used. The residents said, hey, you know what, we really like a weekday event because not all of us are here on Sunday. And so this year we have a midweek event for, I believe it's 3 hours. And I think we have a weekend event as well, but that's extended hours. And it serves, I believe, it serves the population. And we've actually heard from the community to say, this is actually working well for us. I think what I would say is the future evolution for Go Home Lake is there are a number of options, but my recommendation would be to proceed with the lakeside and then use the data collected to determine whether it's appropriate to build a new depot. I know on that property at, I think it's Miners Bay, we had already done some pre-work on establishing a depot in that location. It's going to take some time. And so what I would suggest is in the interim, we look at a series of lakeside events, whatever we think the appropriate length and number of days for those events to serve the community, and then use that data to determine whether a depot is viable or not. And then when that happens, then we'll obviously ask for the appropriate level of budget through the budgeting process. So the answer isn't, this is the answer today. The answer is more, it will continue to be an evolution. What we're looking at is to get a general understanding of what the bin site removals look like for Georgian Bay. And the reason why we have the 3 scenarios, I mean, certainly staff have recommended scenario 3 because we believe that that is the most appropriate scenario to serve Georgian Bay residents. But we also heard from the one-on-one meetings that we've had with members of council, but also the specific meetings with members of district council, that there were inquiries about, going to a Lake of Bays model or even a minimal service model. And so that's why those other scenarios exist. And that's really just to give us a direction on what are we going to do with the bin sites as they stand today, as they get removed. And then it'll continue to evolve just like the rest of the waste system. And then the last comment, and I apologize for being a bit long-winded, Mr. Mayor, but we are working on the solid waste master plan that's also going to look at service levels across the board. And so are there underserved areas? Are there areas in the district that are underserved from a depot transfer station perspective? And do we need to add additional sites? That will come out of that system or that project as well. But I hope that perhaps helps provide some clarity on the future, but happy to answer additional questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on your comments in response to Mr. Steele's comments about the bins being removed, and I'm rather aghast to think that anyone would think that removing them throughout the year will not cause disruption. It'll cause significant disruption as people try and scramble and figure out where they're going to put their garbage, and other bin sites will become the target of increased use as ones are closed down. So closing them all down in December, as per your comments, Mr. Mayor, probably be the best bet because nobody around to notice. And I really do think that might be the best model. It also gives us a full schedule for all bin sites, come up with a remedy for the situation. On top of that, I think we've also got to understand, we haven't commented on this, is that any private company that we bring in or that quotes us on waste disposal is likely to be using a site for disposal of the waste that is much closer than the one that is currently used for our municipality. And that cost alone will be significantly less to them and part of the quoting process they use in their arrangements with whatever we ask them to do. So it's got to be considered. Yeah, maybe they will have a higher cost for curbside pickup just in the cost of doing that alone, but the removal of the waste and moving it will be less. Probably significantly less because distance is less, and that's got to be considered into or factored into any of the equations that come through a private contractor and consideration by us going down the road here. I do hope we can come up with a solution for this. Thanks.
Sorry, Councillor Cooper, I had my mic off there. Apologize.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very brief. By the way, the last comment of Councillor Jarvis is very accurate and a good consideration. We will be, with a private service, typically would be sending the waste to a much closer site. So that's worth noting. But I also just wanted to note that I think the comments about Go Home Lake and a barge service, or sorry, a truck service, probably makes some sense. What is misunderstood, including from one of the first consultants, was that everybody's within 5-minute boat ride of a marina. They're not in Georgian Bay. They may be close in some of the other lakes, the inland lakes, but in my case, it's 35 minutes, close to $100 worth of gas. I'm not making a special run with garbage. I'll go when I want to go home, and I'd carry my garbage with me. So that might be Tuesday, it might be Wednesday, it might be Monday morning. Who knows? It's always a different time, it seems. And I'm not atypical. I am fairly typical of what goes on out on Georgian Bay. So there are great distances, and there are people north of me that spend 45 minutes. They're not going to make a special trip. It's just not practical. So I think fine for some applications to have a truck at some site, but it might work for some in Honey Harbor, but the longer distance people will not be making a special run. And even if you have it in Honey Harbor, the other thing I will point out is that now you're talking about that community where there'd be, literally hundreds of boats lined up on Sunday night. So good luck with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Wojcik.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may ask a question of James Steele. A simple question. It's the responsibility of the District of Muskoka to provide a landfill. My understanding is that Rosewarren is about an hour away from Georgian Bay Township. I'm not sure there's any other waste facility, or that there is any other, I'll call it a dump for lack of a better reason, like Rosewarren, outside of Barrie. I think Barrie is the closest one to us. So the distance is about the same from Barrie to Rosewarren. There is companies that do collect a curbside that take it to a facility in Midland where they dump it, sort it, and then take it to different places. My question to you is, does the province allow garbage recycling from the District of Muskoka Georgian Bay Township, to be delivered outside, say, to Simcoe County and dumped in Simcoe County. Is that legal? Is it appropriate? Maybe you could comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor Coots here, and to Councillor Bocek. So I guess I'll answer it in two ways. So number one, the district has always, as I understand it before my time, but has had the direction of we will manage our waste within the district of Muskoka. And so that's why we have a landfill. That's why all the materials end up at Rosewarne when they're garbage. The solid waste master plan. And so I guess that's the first answer, philosophically, or with specific strategic direction. Is it legal to take material out of Muskoka and dispose of it somewhere else? Absolutely, as long as you have a licensed landfill that can take that material. So if they have an ECA from the ministry, it can certainly, whether it's, sorry, I shouldn't say that, whether it's a landfill, whether it's a disposal facility, whether it's energy from waste, etc. So those are entirely options. And so and then the last piece I'll add is through the solid waste master plan, we are looking at every available option for disposal, whether it's in the district, outside the district, etc. And that'll be considered as part of the master plan to say, what are our long-term disposal options? Because Rosewarne right now has 15 years left. And I think it's worth noting that the entire province has less than 15 years left of landfill capacity, probably closer to 10 years when you look at the average disposal rates and the available capacity. And so finding a willing host or finding a willing landfill to receive your material in Ontario is probably going to be challenging. You're likely moving to an energy from waste type facility or taking the material to Michigan as an example. So through the master plan, we're looking at all the available options and then certainly making those recommendations to council for long-term disposal options. I think the one thing that was shocking to me, and Ottawa is a lot larger population, but their proposed new landfill in a new site is $500 million to develop the landfill. And so even if you say that Muskoka is 1/5 of that, that's $100 million to develop a new landfill. And so so that all needs to be factored into the master planning process. And so that's why we want to look at all the available options to say, is that the right investment? Is that the best way to dispose of waste? Certainly the best way to dispose of waste is to not dispose of it at all and make sure it doesn't end up at the landfill. So I hope that helps answer your question, but I think those are some interesting statistics to share.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly, as you were concluding, it certainly speaks to why we have to do whatever we can to minimize the amount of garbage that we have to collect. And certainly, and then my little side thing when I was talking about, yachters versus cottagers. Yachters are far more likely to be sticking organics in their garbage because they don't have a food cycler on their yacht. And most people don't. And also that they, most marinas don't have a green bin outside at the backyard for that sort. Anyway, with that, Councillor Hazelton, please.
So many things to talk about, so little time.
It's always a worrisome start.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Jarvis's comments about bin removal. You remove the bins in the middle of the year, you're going to have Marina A with bins, Marina B with no bins. You're going to have chaos because the marinas are not far apart from each other. And why does one marina have service and the other marina doesn't? So most boats are put away by the beginning of November. Not all, but most boats are put away by the beginning of November or early November. I would say that if you consider removing bins, don't do it before November, and then do it en masse. That does a couple of things. If you communicate effectively to all the marinas, those marinas that are deciding to go about implementing a private service have the months of November, December, January, February, March, and April to implement alternate strategies. So those are my thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Oh, Councillor Cooper, you're waving. How are you doing?
I just wanted to briefly say, I think Councillor Hazelton could answer this, but he's been talking to the contract out waste management companies, that there are sites that the dumps, shall we say, closer than Rosemore. He can tell us, but I think I recall there was something not far from Coldwater. I think something else over in Oro Medonte, so not very far at all by comparison, maybe half an hour away, that kind of thing. So from Port Severn as an example. Just Councillor Hazelton, can you fill in on that? I think you have more knowledge than I do, but I'm pretty sure there are sites closer than Rosewarne. Thank you.
There's at least one private company who currently who previously did lifts for the district, who would quote on private service. They take it to Midland. They do some things there, and then it goes to somebody who actually wants garbage. Oddly enough, people do. And then the recycling would go to Barrie, to this new service, continuous materials or circular materials or whatever it's called. So they could pick up all of the recycling and take it there. There would be no tonnage fee. There would just be a lift and drop off concept. So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Okay. I'm looking at CO Mariotti. What do you want from us at this point in terms of direction? I mean, I know the things that we should be pursuing and getting more information. Do you need a resolution from us, or have you heard enough and taken enough notes, or what would you like from council at this point? Because I appreciate all the conversation we've had. I really do think we're continuing to narrow down what we're looking into, and we need to get some more information. Sir.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsia. I think the only aspect that staff will need council direction on is on engaging the services of a consultant to carry out the feasibility study on going it private or reviewing private options. It's not an RFP per se, because first of all, we need to find out feasibility, hence the feasibility study. Because if you just issue an RFP, you may not get interested participants, because participants will know, well, they're just kind of putting the feelers out. So why should I put the effort into submitting my best possible price? So to do that, which is obviously, as we all know, waste management is quite involved, and we need to also discuss with the district which elements, essentially we have an agreement right now with the district. So we also need to negotiate through the district what the district would be amenable to in terms of the various options, going private and remaining with the district. So for that, you're talking probably a six-figure number to go through that study. So what staff would be asking is for council to put in the budget a line item to carry out the waste management feasibility study, let's say for a maximum of $100,000. The other aspect of this would be time, because it will take, I dare say it will take a good 6 months to go through this. And my only concern there is that we're knocking on the middle of next year, whereby then we need to start thinking about, okay, the marina bins are going out, and we may still not be making a decision until the feasibility study comes out. So I'm just kind of putting those kind of angles out there. But certainly if council wants to go ahead and do their own research, if you like, on what makes sense for the township, then we're talking setting aside $100,000 to carry this feasibility study.
Thank you. Councillor Bochuk.
Thanks for that, CAO Mariotto. One thing you could probably answer for me is if the Township of Georgian Bay decides to change their service levels with the District of Muskoka, or even privatization of our garbage pickup, make it the responsibility of the Township Georgian Bay. James Steele has a complete staff up there that works in solid waste. I'm wondering what the cost to the township. I imagine our operations department would be in charge of this. We would need extra staff to administer this if we were doing it on their own, the same way that district has additional staff. And in your report, coming back to council sometime soon, hopefully, if you could include that, what type of administration, what type of costs would the township incur by not using the district resources to carry on this service?
Yeah, through you, Mayor Coetzee, that's a very valid point, Councillor Bochuk, and you're absolutely right. There would be additional headcount involved because now we're talking about a service that is going to be administered by the township, and therefore, when the calls come in, my garbage bin didn't get picked up today. It's going to come to the township and not to the district. And not only that, but there would be a contract administration resource that would be required in terms of staffing to be dealing with one or more contractors who would go private. So yes, that would be part of the costs of the feasibility study.
Thank you. Clerk Way, are you crafting a motion? Councillor Hazelton.
I have a question for Mr. Steele. You sent me a copy of report PW-8-2024-6, which was something to do with waste collection services and selecting a contractor. I understand that you've gone ahead with Environmental 360 Solutions. I note that their quote was half the cost of Mid-Ontario, who's been doing the business for several years. I'm looking for a level of confidence that the quality of services provided by this new company will be comparable to the quality of services that we've had from Mid-Ontario, so that we don't experience a half cost, half service for the following year. Thank you.
Commissioner Steele.
Thank you, Mayor Coetzee. I guess what I would say is that we followed the procurement policy and they were the low bid tender. And so they submitted a low compliant tender. And so we awarded it to them through district council, through Engineering and Public Works Committee. We'll certainly be monitoring their level of service and their performance on the contract like we would with any other contract. Can I predict if there's going to be challenges? No, because I can't predict the future. And so all I can say is that their expectations will be required, they will be expected to meet every requirement of the contract that we've asked them to price, and we'll manage it appropriately in that way.
I'm wondering, Commissioner Steele, if I could just do a quick follow-up. Would differences in quotes have anything to do with the recycling being moved over?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it actually doesn't, because this contract begins, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know what they've factored into their pricing. What I can say is that we didn't have recycling included in that pricing because it aligns with the transition to circular materials.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, Councilor Hazelton.
So, James, the concern I have here is we're going through a one more year of district looking after bins. My fear here is if they've come in at half the price of the previous vendor, who I understand were not making tons of money and could never offer a quote of cheap as that, either they don't understand what the real business requirement is, or the quality of service is going to be horrible compared to what we've experienced. And so then we would potentially have the final year of district waste management in all of the marinas as a horrible experience before no coverage of any kind from the district. So it's just a huge concern that I have, and I know our communities have. How could somebody put a quote in, fully understand the business, and have it half the cost of the current vendor? Thank you.
I think we have to be careful that we don't go too far down that road, because that is a district responsibility, their contract agreement, but it is surprising to have that significant a difference. Count, is your hand, is that a new hand or old hand? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. A lot of the decisions or a lot of the conversation about solid waste happens at the District of Muskoka in a committee called the EPW Committee. An EPW Committee, our council representative is Councillor Cooper. A lot of decisions are made at the EPW Committee. They're not a quasi-judicial type of system where they can make decisions on their own. I believe most of the decisions have to come to council to be approved. So my concern is, I've heard from Councillor Cooper, who's very informed on the Georgian Bay Islands and the problems and the issues around the bins for the residents of Georgian Bay. And I'm sure that's what's going to be represented at the EPW committee. I would just like the opportunity to meet with Mr. Cooper, either myself or the councillors from the inland, and be able to truly explain the issues inland, so that when you're meeting with the EPW committee, it's not only about the bay, it's about the entire township. And I would certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about that, Mr. Cooper. Thank you.
May I respond?
Absolutely.
I'm happy to meet with you anytime. Just ask. And so you know, I don't have quite that narrow a view. I consider my role as the township of Georgian Bay and as a whole. I may not know all the nuances, so I'm happy to hear about those. The other thing you need to know, though, is that the EPW committee already met and discussed this subject, and in the last month, and I would say provisionally went forward with option 3. I talked about option 1. They said option 3, and they made that choice. I didn't vote in favor of it because I didn't feel that it exactly met what we needed. We needed some time to consider what services we need or didn't need, and we were being rushed like crazy. So that's where we're at right now, but happy to have a conversation with you. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up to that, I voted in favor of option 3 at council, simply because I think in the short run, that's what we should be doing until we go back to district with our plan. Because my concern was, if we went for anything less than option 3, then all service would be disappearing this coming year, and our residents would be in shock. All right, council, I have a lengthy motion in front of me, but what it speaks to is directing staff to do a feasibility study with a cost of up to $100,000. So I want to go around with each one of you to make a comment if you're willing to support such a thing for now. Obviously, if we put this in, then it will be included in the budget. So in other words, we're basically adding an item to the budget, and then the budget will be reviewed in the next couple of months. So if anybody wants to make a comment on that, please do so now, and then we will go to whether we do the motion or not. So Councillor Bocek, followed by Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. $100,000 seems a lot to put out for a study, but when we put that over the number of years that's going to be in effect, say you take it over 4 years, that's $25,000. If you take it over 10 years, that's $10,000. I think it's money well spent. I think we can achieve those savings. The $100,000 we'd spend on this consultant, I think we'd recover in the savings. that we would not be paying out to district for certain services that we don't want. So I'm in favor of having a consultant do a study on this, and that's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, please.
I'm having difficulty supporting this because of the timeline that we were given. We're hearing from the district that we better make our decision pretty damn fast, and yet we may not even have this study completed and then have to have discussions after that. We could be talking about halfway through next year, which may be almost too late. So I don't know. I do have difficulty around the timelines, and it may not be possible to get it done more quickly. I think if we had more specific information and some of our questions answered that came out today, this council could make a decision. And, you know, it's nice to have a consultant who may shed some light on things, but sometimes it's maybe politically astute to have something like that so we can blame the consultant, but if it's not satisfactory to the community. But I think we have fair bit of the information already, but we need a lot more. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't be forming a specific committee of council to carry on with working on this until we get it sorted. It may only take a month or two, but like 4 or 5 meetings and have it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Graziano, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So 2 things. Number 1, of course, I'm very much inclined to vote in favor of this, albeit I'm quite perplexed at the costs. I understand it was just a general estimate. $100,000 would essentially equate to perhaps someone's 1-year tenure with our municipality if we hired a consultant. So, you know, I'm concerned at the costs that was quoted, but again, I understand it was just a general line item and not an exact. To Councillor Bocek's point, I think if we amortize this over the period of time, and if it were to return results whereby there could be cost savings, and also recommendations on how to address our nuanced issues, specifically for those that are water access versus those that are not. I think that the funds would be better, would be well served by our community. So with that said, I am inclined. I am going to ask that we still do take the vote and we do a registered vote if I can request. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I think of the money that we were prepared to spend in order to try and get the situation sorted out over at Oak Bay, significant funding there, and it was for a very, very specific population within our municipality. I thought it was money well spent. I don't have a problem with that. But by comparison, we're looking at a budgetary item here that would benefit the whole municipality. And in that context, I think it's probably money well spent, though I do find myself somewhat in agreement with Councillor Cooper over timing. We're running at this very, very close to the wire. I lament the fact that we didn't do this sooner, but that's water under the bridge. So I'm happy to move forward on this recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Fredco.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions for our CAO. One is if this item is going into the budget, further to the comments made by other councillors, would this be a capital or an operating item? In which case, if it was capital, it would be amortized over a certain period of time? Or is that a question for our treasurer?
CEO Mariotti.
Through you, Mayor Coutier. I believe it would be funded by reserve.
Okay.
I do not believe it would be capitalized over several years. It would be within that budget year. Okay. Operating reserve, sorry.
Okay, yep, thank you. And then further from a budgetary consideration, the report from Commissioner Steele that we received back in August for the described option 3 and whatnot, one of the operating costs that were not included in option 3 was large item pickup days for the coastal area and the inland lake to Go Home Lake. How will that be handled in 2025? And this is related. I'm only bringing this up because of the budgetary conversation we're having.
Through you, Mayor Coetzee, if I get this wrong, I'm glad that Commissioner Steele is here as well. However, I believe that for the 2025 district budget, that the large item collection for the inland lakes are still included.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you, through you, Chair Coetzee. They are not. So as it stands right now, there are no free large item events. The scenarios align with the district's waste strategy, which means no free waste collection. And so all materials will be need to be delivered to the transfer stations and appropriate fees paid.
So perhaps as an addition to the resolution, we could include part of the study be the feasibility of a private company directly contracted to the municipality or the township for a large item pickup day to be considered for 2025. Thank you.
Councillor Hazelton.
Do we have a terms of reference for this project?
Basically, it's, at this point, just reads for a waste management feasibility study.
So I think we need to have council provide clear direction on what the terms of reference would be for this. And I say that because we hired a consultant several years ago or a few years ago, spent $25,000 and didn't really get anywhere. And that consultant really didn't have the path in the district to get the data that we've been asking for years. And I think that was mostly a waste of money because I'm not sure that there was much that really came out of it. So I'm very concerned. We've got, yes, I can see $100,000 spread over multiple years in concept, but it's a ton of money. We don't have a clear terms of reference. Like, what are we trying to get at with this this thing? So I would not be in favor of approving that. I'd approve setting aside some budget numbers so that we can easily move into it, but I wouldn't want to approve the issuing of a contract until we as council are clear on the terms of reference and what we are going to get out of it, because my fear is that because I have fears on those fronts. So no, I'm not a big fan of approving the issuing, approving a budget item. I could do that today.
From my perspective, I think that we really want this file to move forward. I think we've narrowed options down to a reasonable extent. I think that we require more information, and I don't think we want to, I believe we should approve some expenditure to provide additional support to staff to get this information, because I think it's a major project. And from my perspective, and maybe we have to change the wording on, we're putting in we're identifying a up to, it's like an up to amount to get that additional support. I don't think, I don't know, I'm looking to our CAO. If we approve $100,000 for a waste management feasibility study, I presume that will be done in stages, depending upon what we find. And of course, we'll be getting reports back to council as things go along, because I think it's very important that we make decisions based on information that we have obtained and looking at the different possibilities. And while I think CEO Mariotti is quite capable of doing that work himself, I don't know what's going to happen to the rest of his job. And so I think, to me, it makes sense to spend some money on getting some expertise in to assist us in narrowing this down further. So that's my, and to your comment, Councillor Hazelton, yeah, I think we can work on a terms of reference, and I think that it'll be an ongoing change as we learn. We'll focus on other things as we go along. I hate to see us put $100,000 and say, here, do this feasibility study, and at the end of that $100,000, say, well, we should have gone off in this direction or that. C.O. Mariotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kutia. I think if I can reference the revenue generating study that's just been completed as an example, there was significant stakeholder engagement and feedback received from from members of council, and I see it being no different with this study. What we can do as well is that when we receive, I'm trying to remember the term now, a proposal. When we receive a work proposal, that will allow us to be, relatively detailed as to how you're going to do this. Staff can share that with council, and then council can obviously, if they wish, they can edit and maybe, make sure that such and such a matter is captured, so that it's very clear for the proponent what is expected of them. And again, I'm saying up to 100,000 because just to develop a water quality program is $75,000 to $100,000, and we're talking about a very significant project here. Not only that, but again, reaching out to various stakeholders in terms of what waste management system works for what community, but also interacting heavily with the district, because the district already has a lot of the information that could assist with this, and I know that the district will be willing to help the consultant to carry out this feasibility study. But it will take some time, and it will be complicated, but over the course of 6 months, I fully expect the consulting firm to be engaged with members of council.
I'm going to read a draft motion, and I have it moved by Councillor Pretko, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved, the council directs staff to facilitate a waste management feasibility study, and the council directs staff to include $100,000 in the 2025 budget for a waste management feasibility study to be funded by reserves, and that staff be directed to engage in dialogue with the District of Muskoka to identify options to amend waste services provided by the district that could be transferred to the township, and that two large item pickups to be included as part of the 2025 budget in communities of Honey Harbor and Go Home Lake, Miners Bay, and the council authorized waste management feasibility study be included in the 24-25 work plans, because there should be staff work plans to be clear, and that staff provide regular updates to council and seek further direction from council as the waste management work plan items proceed. All right, and I believe Councillor Jarvis.
Sorry, because you're looking away, I wasn't quite hearing all of that, but did you say 2 large pickups for Go Home Lake and for
Honey Harbor?
I think we're due one in Cognachine next year. We didn't get it this year. It's every 2 years.
All right. Maybe we should just put 2 large item pickups be included as part of the budget and not specify the communities. Because you're right, because we've been we have a history of alternating.
Yes.
Okay. Would it be helpful if we share the screen? Councillor Cooper, go ahead, please.
I'm certainly in favor of the large item pickup, but they're in my view, 2 different subjects. I would like to see a separate resolution for each one.
Okay, so, so in other words, you want a separate, motion with regards to, that having 2 large item pickups be included as part of the 2025 budget.
Correct.
All right, let's remove that line.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And our clerk does her under pressure editing. Councillor Hazelton.
So I'm reading here that identify options to amend waste services that could be transferred to the township. I'm not sure that the township wants to embrace and engage in responsibility.
Microphone.
What, you really wanted to hear what I said?
I'm afraid I do, yes.
I was focused on point number 3, the transferring of waste services to the township. And I'm not sure that we as a township want to be involved in waste services. I think we want to amend the waste services provided by the district that could be made available to township residents. But I don't think we want to transfer those waste services to the township.
Yeah, I mean, it was said that could be transferred to the township. I think it's, I mean,
What services would we ever as a township want?
well, one of the things that I have heard discussed is, it's a number of times, is whether township should be responsible for some of the waste collection versus district. And I'll give you an example. The last couple of years, the township has taken on responsibility for large item service.
Right.
And I think it's important, we said that could be transferred, doesn't mean we're making decisions that things will be transferred.
I think I guess what I'm missing in this is my expectation of that statement was that dialogue with the district would identify options to amend the services provided to the township by the district so that we understand they may change the services that they provide. I don't want to have that concept lost in this, and that, and I think that's very different than, as you articulated, the transferring perhaps of the BARD service to a township responsibility.
Well, I mean, in that case, the district simply refused to do BARD service, and we as council decided that some of our residents should get BARD service, and therefore we as a township provided it through the contract, of course. C.O. Mariotti.
Yeah, I guess through you, Mecca, to the Councillor Hazelton, there's been discussions today about privatizing certain aspects of waste management in the township, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
However, that privatization still has to be administered by someone, and in this case, it would be the township.
So, give me an example, please.
As Mayor Couture alluded to, the large item barge pickup, I was the one that had to arrange all of that.
Understood and agreed. What other, I guess what I'm concerned about is that we would explore other services that would be transferred to the township, and that's what I'm cringing at. Because I don't think we as a township want to embrace responsibilities for other elements of waste transfer or waste handling. So I don't have a problem with this could be transferred concept, but I don't want to lose the sight of the focus being that this consultant would identify options to amend the waste services provided by the district.
I don't understand, because part of what we're looking at is amending the waste services provided by district.
I know, but we don't say that anywhere. The only thing we say is amending it and transferring to the township. Maybe I'm being too picky on this, but
Okay, so how about, oh, I'm just gonna throw this up, that could be transferred to the township or private services? Yeah, we can, or we can just get rid of that paragraph.
no, but I think that, I think the concept of this consultant looking at options to amend waste services provided by the district is critical.
Okay, and the council authorized waste man fees to include in 24 staff work, okay. Councillor Jarvis, do you want to join in this conversation? Because I'm thinking,
Yes, please.
please go ahead.
My thinking is that the district has been reluctant to come up with anything for us that seems to be a viable option as things currently stand. So that's why we're stepping out to do it ourselves. I can't believe that once we've decided to do something on our own via a consulting firm, I don't know the district wants to have anything to do with it anyway. So I think the way it's written right now, I can handle that. I don't want to think that district would be inclined to take on something that we're forcing on them in the way of an alternative way of collecting our waste. And that's, that's the way it would look, wouldn't it? Or just a question on my part, but I like the wording the way it is.
Yeah, no, I think if I can, in fairness to district, they are coming up what they believe is a viable alternative waste collection system. We want to look at additional alternatives. And that's why we want to do this feasibility study. That includes, reviewing what district is offering and reviewing other options. I mean, and for instance, one of those options that we've talked about that clearly district won't offer is private collection at marinas. So,
Mr. Mayor, could I just comment?
Yeah, your turn.
Just briefly, I sort of agree, but need to point out, we don't need to create a waste management department. We're getting a consultant to look at this, and we're going to get different service providers in the future. Our current service provider is the District of Muskoka. We may use the District of Muskoka for some services, and we may outsource the collection in the marinas. And if we do that, I don't know that we need a department at the township to give oversight to that. The marina operators would bring in XYZ company to put bins on site. So I just think we need to be careful with if we're going to create a department here. I think that would be ill-advised. Thank you.
I think that's fair enough, and I think that's one of the reasons why, we want this, I'll call it feasibility study, to look at these alternatives and say, if we do X and Y, we're running down a rabbit hole, and yet A, B, and C are very reasonable. I know maybe that's poor letter selection, but there you go. All right. Why don't we do motion one, and I believe Councillor Graziano asked for a recorded vote. So the motion one, as you can see, moved by Councillor Predko, second by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that Council directs staff to facilitate a waste management feasibility study, and that Council directs staff to include $100,000 in the 2025 budget for a waste management feasibility study to be funded by reserves, and that staff be directed to engage in dialogue with the District of Muskoka to identify options to amend waste services provided by the district that could be transferred to the township, and that Council authorize the waste management feasibility study be included in the 24-25 staff work plans, and that staff provide regular updates to Council and seek further direction from Council as the waste management work plan items proceed. Councillor Wojcik, you have a question before the vote's taken? Okay. Clerk Wave, motion 1, if you don't mind.
Let the record show Councillor Graziano requested a recorded vote. Councillor Graziano, how do you vote?
Yeah.
Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
Reluctantly, yes.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Pretko, how do you vote?
Yes.
It only counts once.
Councillor Bocek, how do you vote?
Yes, and I hope we come in way under budget.
Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote yes with certain reservations about the amount, but hopefully we can hold that down. Thank you.
Mayor Kutsier, how do you vote?
Yes.
Let the record show the motion's carried.
And I think CO Mariotti, clearly you got the resolution, but you also got direction thrown in there to be careful in how you spend this budget item, if it's approved in budget as well. Councillor Bocek.
Sorry, one more question to our CAO. The reserves that you're talking about, can you be specific about what reserve these funds would come out of?
The operating reserve.
Operating reserve, and there's the ability to use that funds without affecting the reserve, or would we have to catch up and bring our reserve to a minimum level to compensate for this?
Through Mayor Kutsier, I wish Ms. Rattigan was here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's fine.
But we can do that at budget discussion.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, thank you.
And we have a second motion, and that's moved by Councillor Pretko again, and second by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that council directs staff to include 2 large item pickups as part of the 2025 budget. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you. I seem to be taking over the mic here. Just a question about Present Island with the heavy island, with the heavy pickup. Present Island, I believe we were not doing a pickup on land, but we would take a barge out to Present Island. They would load all the stuff on that they've collected for 2 years. Would that service still continue?
CO Mariotti.
So what we through Mayor Kutsier to Councillor Bocek. So what we've been doing when I first started, we picked up from 3 locations, including Present Island. At the time, Present Island said that they were good for 5 years. So I can always go back to Present Island Association and just confirm that if they're okay for 2025 or not. And then for the other 2 locations, it was every other year. So 2025 is the year that will be picked up. My thought here is at this point to lump the land-based large item pickup together with the water-based large item pickup, and then just gather a quote from suppliers for carrying out both land and water-based activities.
Thank you.
All right. Do we need the motion read a second time? I'll say all those in favor. 1, 2, 3. I can see some. I can see hands there too. I saw 3 hands there. So that is carried. All right. Thank you very much. And I moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Cooper. Let's get out of here. No, sorry. Be resolved, the Council adopts bylaw 2024-095 to confirm the proceedings of the October 18th, 2024 council meeting. All those in favor? And I see more than enough hands. That is carried. And moved by Councillor Graziano, seconded by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved, the council does now adjourn at 12:27 p.m. until November 4th, 2024 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor? And that is carried. And thank you very much. I think we've had a very good discussion, and I think we're moving forward and narrowing down the options and looking forward to getting reports and updates as more information is gleaned. And I'll say thank you very much and wish everybody a great weekend.